This is the story of a girl whose family lost it all. Now, this noble lady has to live as the poor maid of the most arrogant count ever. Eleanor Schuberg, the head of Count Schuberg's house, tells his maid Irina Nordiak, the eldest daughter of the fallen noble family, to eat, then asks what she has planned for the day. She says she'll learn gardening, then do some laundry and other chores if there's time. Eleanor starts going on about what she should wear outside, but she clearly isn't listening. She's only there because she owes him a huge debt. He asks if she'll be using axes and shovels, and when she says yes, he says he's worried she might chop off someone's head or hand instead of a tree. He's referring to her very impressive habit of turning simple tasks into chaos. She then switches the topic and tells him she's going to marry Ludwig, which makes a maid drop a cup in shock. Eleanor stands up and tells Irina she's not just there to work and earn money. They don't have a normal employer-employee relationship, so she can't just do whatever she wants. He grabs her and says she can't marry anyone but him. Then he adds that he'll be coming to her room at night, and she won't be locking her door. 7 years ago at Kizan Academy, a 5-year-old, Irina is with her friends, who are complaining again because she's done something, and now a teacher is looking for her. Then they spot Eleanor being bullied by Martin and his group. Irina usually ignores gossip, but she's heard a few things about him. His mother is the second wife of Count Schuberg. People say she used to work the streets and that he was raised in a brothel. He has no close friends, and no one has ever seen him smile. Martin keeps picking on Eleanor and even tries to step on his book, but Irina steps in and slaps him, calling him a coward. He calls her crazy. She doesn't stop there. She starts cursing him out with the kind of language you only hear at the docks. When she's done, she asks if it felt good getting embarrassed in front of everyone and tells him to hit her if he's that mad. He doesn't, and he can't, so he and his friends just leave. Then she turns to Eleanor, hands him her handkerchief, and tells him he didn't do anything wrong, so he should fight back. Even if he loses, he should do it with honor. At the time, she had no idea that moment was going to come back and affect her future. Days later, Irina rests her head on her desk, completely worn out from studying. Then she spots her boyfriend, Ludwig Fontern, by the window. She shouts his name so loudly that everyone around him jumps. As they take a walk, Ludwig tells her to lower her voice, and she says she just gets excited when she sees him. Then they start talking about her Ilian language class. Everyone has to learn the language of the most powerful nation in Imphanon. Irina picked Ilian because she thought the professor was chill, and she could sleep through it, but she was very wrong. They sit on a bench, and Irina stretches out and rests her head on Ludwig's thighs, then asks about Eleanor. Ludwig says Eleanor is back in the dorms, and his suspension is over. The day after Irina told him to fight back, he beat up Martin so badly it didn't even feel like he was the victim anymore, so he got suspended for a week. She starts wondering if she's to blame. Ludwig brings up her slapping Martin and asks her again to control her temper. She defends herself by saying Martin called her crazy, conveniently leaving out that she slapped him first. Ludwig knows, but doesn't call her out. Instead, he says he's worried something serious might happen to her if she keeps acting like this. She quickly switches topics and brings up the monarchy and Il's collapsing. From what she heard in her Ilian class, the king's whole system might fall apart, and if that happens, the entire caste system could go down with it. She asks Ludwig if he'd marry her in Il's if the monarchy really collapses, and he says he doesn't think the count her father would approve, but she's confident she can convince him. She tells Ludwig all she needs is him, and he tells her she's all he needs too. Later, Eleanor shows up at Irina's class and signals for her to follow him outside by tilting his bruised face in the direction he's heading. As she follows, she notices he's limping, which is odd because he didn't get a single scratch when he fought Martin. So she asks what happened. He stays quiet for a bit, then says he just fell. It's the first time she's hearing him speak, and she thinks his voice is nicer than she expected. She looks over his bruises and casually calls them artistic, which actually makes him smile. He pulls out the handkerchief she gave him and thanks her. When she says he didn't need to return it, he admits he just wanted an excuse to talk to her. She reaches for it, but he pulls it back and asks if he can keep it while already slipping it into his pocket. With no real choice, she lets him keep it. They stand there in silence for a bit, then she points out that he didn't drag her out just to say thanks. He says he doesn't feel particularly grateful anyway. The look on her face makes him laugh. Then, just like that, he tells her he wants her to be his girlfriend. This shocks Irina. She asks why he's bringing it up all of a sudden, and he says he finds her interesting. Ever since she told him to fight back, he hasn't been able to get her out of his head. Irina thinks his confession is terrible. She tells him he could have just said she was pretty, and without missing a beat, he says she's so beautiful he wants to date her. She tells him she's already seeing Ludwig. He asks if she means Ludwig Fontern, Viscount Fontern's son. The way he says it puts her on edge. She glares at him, but when he looks into her eyes, she flinches. After that day, Irina feels like Eleanor is always somewhere nearby. The next semester, he shows up in her Ilian language class, which surprises her and everyone else. He smiles at her and drags a desk over to sit beside her. She points out that he never took beginner Ilian, and he says he didn't, but wanted to try it because it interests him. She thinks he's strange. He walks like a noble but sits like he doesn't care, has a well-groomed face with a slightly dangerous smile, acts polite but still looks down on people. She starts wondering if his background has something to do with it. She shakes her head and tells herself to stop judging him while he's sitting right there. Then she warns him he's taking Ilian too lightly and his grades will suffer. He points out that her grades have already suffered, and she immediately slumps. He apologizes, and she notices he doesn't have a textbook, so she pushes her desk closer so they can share. Then she starts explaining how strict the Elayan professor is. Later, Irina is convinced Eleanor is following her schedule when he shows up at her swordsmanship class. She challenges him to a fight, and the other boys are secretly glad he joined. There are 2 other girls in the class, but Irina always insists on fighting the boys, and she gets annoyed when they go easy on her. As she spars with Eleanor, she realizes he's actually very skilled. He says it's because he grew up in a rough place, so he's had plenty of practice. He tells her if she wants to stick strictly to technique, she should train with someone else, but since everyone in class is scared of her, she might as well keep training with him. As they keep fighting, he starts teaching her along the way. Just as they finish, Ludwig arrives. Irina jumps into Ludwig's arms, and he tosses her into the air while her classmates complain about the very obvious public display. Irina and Ludwig don't care. As they walk off, Ludwig turns back and looks at Eleanor. Later, Irina and Ludwig have a picnic. Irina goes on and on about how good his mother's cooking is, but Ludwig isn't really listening. He's too busy thinking about Eleanor. When Irina notices, he tells her not to hang out with him. She asks if he just doesn't like her being around other guys. He asks why she always trains with boys and why she even needs to learn how to fight. That annoys her. She says she's always wanted to learn, and there are 3 girls in the class, so someone would end up without a partner anyway. He calls her a dummy, and she asks if he thinks she's immature because she's not like other girls. He twists it, saying she's basically asking if he thinks she's too kind. Then he says he just has a bad feeling about Eleanor, something about him doesn't sit right. Meanwhile, Eleanor gets home, and the servants laugh as he walks past. He stops outside his father's study, where the servant at the door greets him the same one who usually whips him. The servant tells him his father is waiting. Eleanor's hand trembles as he opens the door. When he steps inside, his father tells him it's time to start learning the trade. Many years ago, the Schuberg family took over a very successful trade union. The Count doesn't really have the skill or sense for that kind of work, but somehow the business still ends up covering the territory's financial problems. Count Schuberg tells Eleanor he can't train his older son to be a trader and embarrass the family since he already inherited the title and went into politics. So Eleanor has to take on that role instead. The next day at school, Eleanor stares out the window, thinking it's time to build something profitable. He knows nobles look down on trade. He watches Irina chatting with her friends and remembers her telling him to fight back, even if he loses with honor. He figures she's probably never lost in her life. As the daughter of a marquis, people just give her what she wants. Back when she stood up for him, he wanted to tell her there's no honor in losing. To him, getting even one chance at victory means enduring, waiting, and being miserable over and over again. That's how he got his shot at the Schuberg trade union. Now his chance is here. In Ilian language class, the professor announces that the Il's monarchy has fallen. Irina thinks it's not that surprising since Il's never had as much power as Kisan or Imphanon. The professor explains that this will help merchants and the middle class grow. The noble students can't really process that. Irina notices Eleanor staring at her and quickly covers her face. She skipped swordsmanship class and even came late just to sit at the back and avoid him, but he's still noticed her. She knows avoiding him just because of what Ludwig said isn't fair, and she feels a bit guilty. Meanwhile, Eleanor thinks if she's trying not to be seen, she's doing a very bad job. Later, Irina meets Ludwig and talks about staying back that weekend, so they can spend time together. but he already plans to go home to see his sick younger sister, Carol. He thought it was just a cold, but she isn't getting better. Irina asks if she should get her father to prepare medicine for her, but Ludwig knows her father doesn't approve of his family, so he politely turns her down. A few days pass and Ludwig still hasn't come back. Irina gets bored, then starts to worry. Around that time, she overhears some classmates talking about Eleanor working at the trade union. They wonder if he actually inherited it or if he's just working there, then start laughing about it. They even go as far as suggesting he might not really be Count Schuberg's son because of his mother's reputation. Irina steps in to defend him again. Meanwhile, Eleanor is standing by the door, listening. Irina starts listing all his bad qualities, which makes the people she's defending him from wonder if she's actually insulting him. Then she says he hasn't done anything they can blame him for, so if they have a problem, they should say it to his face instead of talking behind his back. When she's done, Eleanor quietly walks away, thinking she's the clueless one. He feels like she should have learned to be more discerning, like them. In his mind, she's avoiding him because she's uncomfortable, yet still defending him when he's not there. Up until now, he's only had one goal, but now he realizes there's something else he wants, something he's been holding on to for a long time. Days later, the Alain professor tells Irina to go to the infirmary, but she insists she's fine, even while coughing. She refuses to let a simple cold ruin her perfect attendance. As the lesson goes on, her vision starts to blur, and she ends up collapsing onto her desk. When she wakes up, Eleanor is beside her, reading to the whole class, with his jacket draped over her. It doesn't take long for her to realize he's reading a poem in Alien. She ends up drifting back to sleep, listening to his voice. About a year later, they graduate. Irina manages to convince her father not to attend. After everything is over, she sits alone in a pavilion, thinking about how it's her last day there, when Eleanor shows up and congratulates her. He tells her he was happy they went to school together. She says she'll see him around, and he says, yeah, for sure. 8 years later, at Count Schuberg's house, Eleanor receives a document. After reading it, he calls Irina's name. Irina stands in front of the Schuberg house, telling herself everything will be fine. She didn't do anything wrong, her family just went a little bankrupt, so she's just a bit embarrassed. After the fall of the Il's monarchy, the Imphanon dynasty collapsed too, and since the Kisan dynasty depended heavily on Imphanon, it got shaken badly. The king's power dropped fast, and every noble loyal to the royal family took a hit. The royal family couldn't keep up with the sudden rise of foreign capitalists or the growth of a third power in Kisan. With commoners now richer than nobles, the whole caste system basically stopped making sense. In the middle of all this, Eleanor found huge success. No one really knows how he ended up succeeding his father as count instead of the eldest son. But over time, people learned that he owns the capital's intelligence guild and also runs a loan company, something nobles look down on. As Irina sits there waiting for him, she keeps telling herself not to feel intimidated. She's just here to talk. An hour earlier, the Schuberg butler walks into Eleanor's office with some documents, clearly nervous. Like the rest of the servants, he's scared of Eleanor. For the past 3 years, Hans has been reporting Irina's every move to him. Because of that, he knows she prefers meat over bread, hasn't been to a salon in over a year, and, more than anything, she's not like other women. As Eleanor goes through the documents, Hans mentions that Irina went to Lord Martin Jorg to borrow money, but somehow ended up paying his medical bills instead. Eleanor calmly tells Hans to find out what actually happened and bring him all of Martin's financial records and income reports. Hans can tell that even though Eleanor looks calm, he's angry. To him, it feels like another family is about to go bankrupt. He suggests helping Irina financially. With how things are going, he worries she might end up being sold off, but he's sure Eleanor wouldn't allow that. Among the servants, there's always talk about how Eleanor feels about Irina. Some wonder if he's even capable of love. Others think he's just obsessed with her. Eleanor has been quietly removing anything and anyone that could cause problems for Irina, and at this point, he's the only one who can really help her. Then Darren, the head of information at the guild and Eleanor's confidant, arrives and says he heard Irina visited the trade union headquarters. Back in the present, Eleanor meets Irina. They haven't seen each other since last year, when he proposed and she slapped him something he doesn't let her forget. She gathers her courage and tells him she's there to ask for a loan, even offering to work for him to pay it back. He says he already has plenty of servants. She takes that as a no and starts to leave, but he stops her, saying that in business, you have to offer something the other person actually wants, and what he wants isn't a servant. He says he can pay off her debt, but he needs one thing from her. He tells her he doesn't expect her to love him, but he wants her to be his. She reminds him that she already has someone she loves, and he tells her that since he doesn't expect her to love him, that reason doesn't matter anymore. She asks if he's just asking for her body. He doesn't answer, but the look on his face says enough. She stands up, angry, and starts shouting at him. He asks if she still believes a person's heart can be moved with money. She tells him he can't buy someone's love and she would know, because she doesn't have any. In her anger, she kicks the tea on the table and walks away. At the door, she stops and says she's more capable than he thinks. She lists what she can do, including speaking Ilian, though not as well as him and being fluent in Imphanese since she learned it young. She adds that if nothing else, she can at least carry things for him. For years, people have been telling her to get married, even if it's to some foreign noble. She knows it's because her father wants to get her out of this situation, since there's very little a noble woman can actually do. The most valuable thing she has is her body. When Eleanor tries to touch her, she slaps his hand away. On her way home, she realizes she's in serious trouble after failing to get the loan. She remembers her mother telling her she wouldn't get far because of her temper. After failing badly in several business attempts, her father became seriously ill. She thinks maybe it was a good thing her mother died before the family lost everything, but now she's not so sure. Someone as reckless as her father probably needed someone as steady as her mother. Her mother also used to say she was just like her father, and that she should think things through 3 times before acting. Right now, Irina is buried in loans with interest piling up. She needs to make at least minimum wage just to keep the loan sharks off her back that week. She also has to teach Imphanese to kids at the harbor the next day. But at the moment, she doesn't want to think about any of that. She goes to a bar and drinks a lot. Some men approach her, she flips them off and leaves. She stumbles through the streets drunk, not realizing one of the men from the bar is following her. She suddenly gets the feeling she's being watched, but when she turns around, no one's there, so she keeps going. Meanwhile, some men drag that guy into an alley. One of them follows her to make sure she's safe, while the others stay behind to deal with him. Later, Irina arrives at Ludwig's house. Ludwig takes one look at her and asks if she's been drinking again. She tries to deny it, but he gives her the same look he gives his 3 younger siblings, and she immediately fidgets and admits she drank a little. He tells her to sit down while he goes to make her hangover tea. When he comes back with the tea, she asks about Carol, who is still sick. He says Carol is asleep, then asks how things went with Eleanor. She quietly says it didn't go well. After a few seconds of silence, Ludwig tells Irina to do what she has to do without worrying about him. He touches her hand as he says that whatever she chooses, he will be fine, and that everything she has done is enough for him. At that point, Irina starts getting annoyed. He thanks her for loving him, and she quickly tells him she isn't breaking up with him. She drinks the tea and leaves the house upset. Ludwig thinks he can't ask her to stay with him when he has nothing to offer. He feels like he's nothing compared to her, and he accepts that this is the end. He wonders how he's supposed to hold on to her when all he can give is sincere love, and that love would only make her life harder. The next day, Irina gets ready for the only job she feels qualified for. She's what people call an educated woman. In these times, everyone wants education no matter their class, but there are still very few places for higher learning and limited opportunities. That ends up being an advantage for someone like Irina, who has a diploma from Kisen Academy. While she dresses, she decides to forget about everything from the day before. She even puts on a new dress to lift her mood and tells herself she won't give up. Then she heads out. When she reaches Cheyenne Harbor, she realizes she's late. Suddenly, a large man blocks her path. Before she can react, someone grabs her from behind and covers her mouth. They drag her into an alley while she struggles to break free, even biting one of them. Later, Hans rushes into Eleanor's room and informs him that Irina has been taken. The loan company takes Irina onto a ship, planning to move her somewhere else. Hans manages to bribe the ship captain so the departure is delayed. Eleanor doesn't react to the news that Irina has been taken. He simply says that if a debt can't be collected, the next step after taking property is taking the person. He thinks that if Irina had accepted his offer from the beginning, or his proposal, or even the one he made yesterday, none of this would have happened. She keeps throwing her life away again and again, but he can't just stand by and watch it. He instructs Hans to buy up all the remaining debts and rights of the Nordiak household. Then Hans mentions that Irina was injured while resisting the men who took her onto the ship. That immediately changes Eleanor's expression. He tells Hans to handle it, and Hans understands he means to eliminate them. Eleanor also tells him to bring Irina to him respectfully. Later, Eleanor watches from his window as the carriage carrying Irina arrives. He thinks she probably sees him as no different from the loan sharks, even if their methods are different. When Irina steps out, looking rough and covered in bruises, it angers him. He tells Hans to keep the men who took her alive. Hans already knows what that means. They're going to suffer a slow and painful end. Eleanor asks Irina if she understands that if she had boarded that ship, it would have been the end for her. Then he lectures her about how dangerous the harbor is, saying teaching children there is fine, but she should never go there alone. Irina wonders how he even knows she teaches children. Then she remembers the man who came to settle her debt was wearing the Schuberg family crest. Eleanor tells her that the House of Schuberg has taken over her debt and cleared part of it, and from now on she will live in his house. She asks about her father, but Eleanor says he's already taken care of it, he's been moved somewhere safe, and someone will be sent to look after him. After some hesitation, and with Eleanor's insistence, she finally agrees to stay. She thanks him, and he sends her to the room she'll be staying in. A servant brings her fresh clothes to change into. When she gets inside the room, she slides down to the floor, thinking she needs to tell Ludwig and see her father. But she still can't figure out what she's supposed to do next. In the morning, Irina jumps out of bed, makes her bed, and gets dressed. Then she heads out. At her home, mornings are usually loud with servants moving around and chatting, but here it's different quiet, a bit gloomy, but very well kept. She walks through the silent house until she finds the housekeeper. She greets the housekeeper in a bright, cheerful way that the servants aren't used to. The housekeeper just stares at her blankly for a moment, then calls her "my lady," and says they will do their best to serve her during her stay. Irina scratches the wound on her face and tells her not to speak so formally, because she's not a guest, she's there to work. That confuses the housekeeper. Then Irina asks for a maid uniform. Meanwhile, Eleanor asks Hans about Irina. Hans doesn't really know how to answer, and assumes she's probably still asleep since she's a noble. Eleanor says she's already awake after everything that happened, she's used to waking up early. As Hans goes to check on her, Eleanor tells him to ask if she will have breakfast with him, which surprises Hans, because Eleanor doesn't even eat breakfast. Later, a large amount of food is set for breakfast, which is strange to Hans since Eleanor normally doesn't eat much at all, let alone breakfast. Eleanor says Irina agreed to eat with him, then hesitates like he wants to say something else. Before he can, Irina walks in wearing a maid uniform. Eleanor doesn't show any reaction, but he clearly doesn't like it. He thinks she's planning to earn a little money and leave him. When she sits down, he asks if her room is uncomfortable, since she looks pale. She says she just isn't used to it yet. Then he comments on her outfit, right in front of the maids who wear it every day. He tells her he understands what she's trying to do and asks her to change back into her normal clothes. She says she likes it because it's comfortable. He tells her he'll send more comfortable clothes to her room, then walks over, politely says, "Excuse me," and pulls the cap right off her head. He throws the cap onto the floor, steps on it, and returns to his seat. Irina comments that she didn't know he could be politely rude, but he simply replies that they should eat. She asks if it isn't wrong for her to be eating with him. Still, the way she eats doesn't really make the maids think she's uncomfortable at all. Eleanor says he finds it lonely eating alone, but if she doesn't want to dine with him, that's fine. As they eat, she notices he's only eating vegetables and complains about it. She also adds a quote from Lord Nikens, saying, "A good meal nourishes the soul, not just the body." Eleanor responds by quoting a scholar named Durkle, who claims that eating too much meat makes people savage. He explains that the idea came from studying meat consumption among aggressive groups in the Kellyan region. Then he quickly adds that he's joking. Hans pours water into Irina's glass, and she casually starts talking to him, telling him not to be so formal. As they speak, Hans begins to feel nervous from the pressure of Eleanor's stare. He says he's more comfortable being formal and quickly slips away. Irina thinks she needs the servants to see her as a worker if she's going to work there, but instead the master of the house speaks formally to her while she treats him too casually. After they finish eating, she asks Eleanor how much the servants earn. He explains that her debt cannot be paid off just by working there. She says she knows, but she doesn't want to live feeling like she's incapable of doing anything, so he should let her work and earn money anyway. Later, in Eleanor's office, the housekeeper apologizes for giving Irina the maid uniform. Eleanor tells her to let Irina work, and the housekeeper and Hans exchange confused looks. The housekeeper then asks what kind of work she should assign her, and Eleanor simply says she should let Irina do whatever work she wants. A few minutes after breakfast, several carriages arrive at the Schuberg house and the servants start rushing around. The maids also hurry to the front. Irina stops a blonde maid and asks where everyone is going. The maid explains that when the master leaves the house, everyone on the first floor must come out to see him off. Irina joins them. They line up outside and Irina watches Eleanor walk toward his carriage. Just before stepping in, he stops and turns back, then walks toward her. She gets nervous, hoping he won't come her way, but he does. He stops right in front of her and asks if she's seeing him off. She starts to answer casually, then catches herself and responds formally, calling him, "My lord." He tells her she can speak normally, but she keeps speaking formally anyway. He asks about her plans for the day, then says he has already spoken to the housekeeper, so she shouldn't overwork herself, but if she chooses to do nothing, that would actually be better. Irina, now embarrassed, whispers that he should leave. He pretends he can't hear her, which only frustrates her more. Finally, she snaps and tells him to get out, calling him an a-hole. He smiles brightly and says he'll be back early. At the Schuberg Trade Union headquarters, Darren hands Eleanor a report about a good harvest in nearby countries, as well as news of a civil war in Infanon that will increase food demand. Eleanor asks whether the Royals or the Republicans are likely to win, since he wants to sell to whoever comes out on top. But since the outcome is uncertain, he decides to trade through a union in Infanon that hasn't taken sides. Darren points out that this will bring in less profit. Eleanor already knows that, but says he doesn't want to create future enemies. He's also confident that if his plan works and they gain influence over Infanon's market and pricing, they won't need to worry about choosing sides again. He wants to gain both the Royals' and Republicans' loyalty, so they'll have to rely on him. Back at the Schuberg house, Irina tries chopping wood but fails repeatedly, each swing making the blonde maid and gardener more and more nervous. The gardener explains the proper technique. She tries again, but the axe flies out of her hands, startling everyone present. Eleanor catches both the axe and her. He asks her what she was trying to do with an axe, and she answers by asking if he can't see she is chopping wood. He looks at the servants, and they all shake their heads very quickly. Feeling awkward because he is still holding her, she tells him she is fine and he should let her go. He asks if she isn't seeing him off anymore, but she has no idea what he is talking about, so he lets her go and says he is nothing. Then he leaves. The blonde maid, Daisy, is shocked by Eleanor's soft smile. The master she knows is basically ruthless. Irina pulls Daisy along, saying they should go see the housekeeper to find out what other tasks they have. Daisy reluctantly follows, wondering how much more damage Irina plans to do in the house. Meanwhile, Eleanor tells Hans not to let Irina handle anything like an axe again. He adds that something like that in her hands is dangerous, since she could accidentally chop someone's foot off. Later, Hans is taking a bath while thinking that Irina is probably aware she has no real skill in household work. She's the eldest daughter of a marquis who never had to do chores, and she didn't teach children at the harbor because she wanted to, but because no one else would hire her. Somewhere in the house, Irina breaks a vase, and Hans tells her to let the other servants handle the work. He promises he'll tell the master she is doing a wonderful job. He even begs for her to be given time to improve, asking how she is supposed to learn anything if she isn't allowed to try. About a month later, Irina is cleaning a window, thinking about how people treated her after her family lost everything. There were people who wanted something from her, the men who said vulgar things, her academy classmates who pretended to care but still hurt her, and people who gave her degrading tasks just to humiliate her. It makes her angry, but it also makes her think back to when she had everything. She wonders if she lived so badly that she deserves all of this. She doesn't know the answer, but she realizes there are people who take comfort in other people's suffering. The housekeeper approaches with an envelope containing her salary, thanking her for working hard over the past month. Irina happily takes it, which makes the housekeeper smile. She then says she is looking forward to working with her. Irina walks in, not wearing the maid uniform. She hands him an envelope and says she wants to pay him back. He tells her to leave it on the table, so she does, then immediately apologizes for basically shoving money in his face, saying she just wanted to give it to him quickly, which makes him flinch. Eleanor understands that their relationship is contractual. He's using the most effective method to keep her close, but he doesn't want to treat her harshly or act like a debt collector or take her money like that's all their relationship is. But canceling her debt and giving her the freedom she wants is the kind of noble, clean love he has no intention of offering. He asks her if she hates being with him that much. She's confused by how he reaches that conclusion. She says he's pretty good at twisting people's words. She slams her hand on the table, saying she's just happy to earn money with her own hands and only wanted to show off a little. Nothing more. She points at him while she keeps ranting, which almost makes Eleanor laugh, but he holds it back. She asks if she really has to think this hard before speaking to him, or worry about how he'll take everything. He brings up the time she avoided him and says it must be because she hates him. When she says she doesn't hate him, he tells her not to avoid him and warns her how stubborn he can be. Then he apologizes for being too sensitive, and the servants all let out a relieved sigh. Later, while Irina is doing the dishes, Daisy tells her the master is about to leave the house. Irina refuses to go see him off. Daisy warns her that if she doesn't, he will come looking for her. And Irina angrily complains about Eleanor always putting her on the spot. With no choice, she goes out to see him off, clearly not happy about it. When Eleanor sees her, he walks over. Then he reaches for her cap, saying it doesn't suit her. She asks what that has to do with him, but still takes it off, saying it's uncomfortable to work with it on. Eleanor gently brushes her hair back and braids it. When she touches it, he tells her it looks lovely, then leaves. Later, Irina goes to see Ludwig, and he's surprised to see her. She tells him it's her day off, and he offers her some tea. While he's serving it, Irina notices his ceiling looks terrible. Ludwig brushes it off and says he was planning to call someone to fix it. Then Irina grabs the knife from the tray and pokes the ceiling, making water start pouring through it. Ludwig quickly puts a bucket under the leak, clearly embarrassed. Out of nowhere, Irina says she wants to dance, catching him off guard. She says the dripping water sounds like the rhythm of a waltz. Then she starts dancing and singing while Ludwig just watches her fondly. Then he hugs her, thinking that whenever he looks at her, all his hardships seem to fade away. Even the sound of dripping water starts sounding beautiful to him. Irina makes him sit down and hands him an envelope with money inside so he can get a better doctor for Carol. He immediately tries to refuse it, but she insists the money is for Carol. She admits she feels bad for not asking her father to get Carol a doctor back when things were good. At the time, her life had been so easy that she never really understood how suddenly suffering could appear or how easily people could die. Ludwig reminds Irina that she still has a huge debt to pay off, but she says her debt is like an ocean. Taking out one bucket of water wouldn't change anything, so she'd rather use that bucket for something more urgent. While she keeps talking, Ludwig remembers how inferior he used to feel around her. He once thought it was because of her status and money, but now that she's lost everything, he realizes those things were never the reason he felt that way. He asks her if Eleanor knows she's doing this, and she asks if she really needs Eleanor's permission to spend money she earned herself. Ludwig then asks if Eleanor has ever been improper with her or taken advantage of her. She starts to say no, but flinches when she remembers Eleanor standing so close to her. Ludwig notices immediately and assumes the worst. He grabs her and starts shouting, demanding to know what Eleanor did to her. Ludwig is holding her so tightly that she tells him Eleanor didn't do anything. If anyone is being improper right now, it's him. That makes Ludwig let go of her immediately. The next day, Irina is peeling potatoes while thinking she might have been too harsh on Ludwig. Then, two maids walk in, carrying a tray of food, and awkwardly ask if she can take it to the master. Irina agrees, though she can't help feeling like people keep giving her every task that involves Eleanor. As soon as she leaves, the maids sigh in relief that Irina is around. One of them admits she still gets nightmares on the days she has to see Eleanor. The other starts talking about how many corpses they've had to clean up, but the housekeeper cuts her off with a loud throat clear. The maids quickly apologize and rush back to work. The housekeeper thinks about how everyone tries their best to stay quiet, but nobody is unaware of how cruel the master is. When people found out that the loan shark who saved the trade union from bankruptcy and the owner of the gambling house that ruined the Schuberg family's eldest son were both actually the second son of the family, the bloodbath that followed felt almost planned from the start. And now that same master has been unbelievably gentle with Irina, even when she destroys his expensive things. When Irina brings Eleanor his food, he asks her to sit and eat with him. She refuses, saying she's still working, so he asks what she's working on. After she tells him, he asks if it's going well. The question catches her off guard a little, and then he casually offers to give her some pointers. She's surprised because she never imagined Eleanor peeling potatoes of all things. He says he can, then asks where exactly she thinks he grew up, which embarrasses her a bit. He suggests they go peel the potatoes together, but Irina refuses. She says it would make everyone uncomfortable. Eleanor stands up and reminds her that he's the master of the house and the one paying everyone's salary, so why should he care whether they're comfortable or not? When they get to the kitchen, all the servants suddenly become stiff while continuing their work like nothing is happening. Irina pulls Eleanor off to a corner, where he starts peeling potatoes with surprising skill. She asks where he learned how to peel potatoes, and he replies that he's good with anything involving blades, which immediately makes the servants flinch. After peeling potatoes for a while, he asks if she has any other debts he doesn't know about, and says he would like to know where all her money is going. He also reminds her that he's already spending a lot of money on both her and her father. Hesitantly, Irina explains that there's someone who needs the money more than she does. The person is sick, so she gave them the money, then quickly apologizes in case it bothers him. Eleanor tells her that while he may be patient, he is not understanding, and he's definitely not a good person. He says he allowed her to do these small chores to give her some peace of mind, not so he could watch her sacrifice herself for that man, meaning Ludwig. Then he reminds her not to forget why she came to his house in the first place. According to him, he owns everything that belonged to her father, including her. They stare at each other for a moment before Irina finally asks Eleanor if he really has to phrase things like that and rub it in her face. She adds that now she understands he really isn't a good person. Eleanor comments that most people would have figured that out a long time ago, and Irina snaps back that maybe they would if he would stop looking at her so kindly all the time. Eleanor tells her she never should have been kind to him or defended him in the first place. She accuses him of paying back her kindness with revenge, but he argues that he paid her back with money. Irina immediately points out that the money wasn't free, and he admits that he also wanted an excuse to stay close to her, so he used whatever methods he could to make that happen. That makes Irina remember how, back when they were in school, he once used returning her handkerchief as an excuse to see her again. Back then, she used to think of him as some strange but lovely flower. Now she can't help wondering how he became the man standing in front of her today. After they finish peeling the potatoes, Eleanor casually suggests that she clean his room next. But the second they get there, Irina realizes the room is already spotless. She walks around trying to find even a little dust and completely fails. Eventually, she complains that Eleanor seriously isn't normal while he just watches her with a small, amused smile. The following day, Eleanor is in a meeting with Darren, who informs him that the Royalists are currently winning the Civil War. Eleanor immediately starts thinking ahead in case the Royalists actually pull it off. Right now, the Royalists and the Republicans are fighting over the Republicans' final line of defense, and guild informants have reported that the Royalists are preparing a massive attack to retake the castle. The tide is clearly shifting, but Eleanor still questions whether the Royalists can really win the war. A few days later, Irina walks into the dining room for breakfast wearing a beautiful dress. Eleanor asks what happened to her horrible uniform, and she happily explains that it's her day off. When he asks what she plans to do, she proudly says she's going to rest. Then she immediately starts bragging about washing all the curtains by herself. After that, she casually mentions that she always thought the inside of the house felt gloomy, but now she realizes the problem isn't the decor, it's the owner. Daisy instantly flinches and nervously looks at Eleanor, but instead of getting angry, he just laughs and jokes about giving Irina a raise. Daisy practically melts in relief. Irina happily eats her breakfast, but the moment salad is served, she refuses to touch it because she hates vegetables. Then Eleanor suggests she come with him since she's already dressed so nicely. He says he'll give her a tour of the Schuberg Trade Union headquarters, and Irina agrees. After breakfast, Irina and Eleanor head to the Schuberg Trade Union headquarters on horseback instead of taking a carriage, and Irina ends up enjoying the ride a lot. When they arrive at Cheyenne Port, they finally stop riding, and Eleanor comments that he's impressed she actually knows how to ride a horse, which annoys her a little. He tells her she seems to enjoy everything she does, and she replies that people always say she gets excited too easily. Eleanor points out that she even learned Ilian just because it seemed fun. Irina admits that's true and smiles while remembering her days at the academy. For Eleanor, the academy had been the worst period of his life, and the only good memories he had from that time were because of Irina. Remembering that, he asks if she used to teach at the harbor in Elaine. Irina says she actually taught Iphanes since it was more useful there. Then she starts complaining about how nobody trusted her when she first arrived at the harbor. She asks Eleanor if she looks incompetent or if her face just doesn't inspire trust. Eleanor says nothing, though privately he thinks it's because she looks like someone who has never worked a single day in her life. Irina keeps talking anyway, saying people finally started appreciating her once they found out she had a degree, even though she never studied Ifanese at the academy. Then she mentions hearing that the academy still only accepts students from high-ranking families and says she can't believe they still cling to such outdated rules. Eleanor explains that many nobles in Kisen are still obsessed with their old glory days. Irina then asks what he thinks about her teaching during her days off because she wants to pay him back as quickly as possible. Eleanor reminds her that she was just complaining about how much work she already has to do, and she immediately yells that she was obviously joking. He tells her he'll think about it before changing the subject and offering to show her the cargo storehouse where newly arrived goods from Ills are kept. When they arrive at the storehouse, Irina is amazed by how much stuff is packed inside. Then she notices some items that clearly don't look like they came from Ills. Eleanor explains that those goods actually came from the eastern continent through Ills. Since the eastern continent is incredibly far away, he only imports luxury items from there. Ills is already far enough as it is, but the eastern continent is even farther. Irina spots a piece of pottery that once belonged to the eastern royal family. Even though it looks old and dirty, she immediately says it looks expensive. Eleanor tells her it's probably the most expensive item in the entire warehouse. He explains that antique art is worth whatever buyers are willing to pay for it and says only a few people can truly recognize valuable items. His voice trails off while watching her stare at the pottery. Afterward, Irina asks him to take her to see the ocean. When they get there, she asks why the ocean has so many different colors. Eleanor explains that it's because the ocean has different depths. He keeps talking about how deep the water is and how parts of it even produce light. And while listening, Irina feels like he's talking about people too. Eleanor says that when he was younger, he used to wonder the exact same thing. Back then, he would stay by the ocean all day just to avoid getting beaten at home. Then he offers to show her some of the ships owned by the trade union. He shows her a massive galleon ship that's preparing to sail to Safiano and takes her aboard. Once they're on the ship, he wraps his cape around her shoulders, saying the ocean air is cold. She asks if he isn't cold himself, and he says he prefers warmth, but he grew up in the cold, so he's used to it. Suddenly, a little boy yelling, "Daddy," startles her. When she turns around, she sees the boy hugging his father, who's working on the ship. The man smiles at his son, but the second he notices Eleanor, his expression changes completely. He hurriedly pulls his son away and leaves. Honestly, the only two people on the ship who don't seem to sense any danger around Eleanor are the little boy and Irina, who's busy leaning over the deck admiring the ocean. Eleanor clenches his jaw before gently pulling her away from the railing, explaining that if the ship sways while she's leaning like that, she could fall overboard. Irina blushes immediately and smacks his hand away. He apologizes, and she points out that he always acts first and apologizes afterward. Then a loud horn echoes through the harbor, signaling that the ship is about to leave. When Eleanor says they should get off, Irina accuses him of changing the subject. He casually tells her she can stay aboard if she wants, but once the ship sails, it won't return to Kisen for several months. In the end, he helps her off the ship, and together they watch it depart along with several others. Irina asks how much it costs to own a ship like the galleon, and Eleanor replies that one could be bought with the amount of money she owes him. She stares at him and says he talks like that isn't an insane amount of money. He counters by asking if the better question shouldn't be, "Do I seriously owe you that much?" Completely unfazed, Irina proudly declares that only confident thinking can save someone from the darkest night, quoting Sir Dale's 101 habits for the happiness of an Eleanite's body and mind. Then she immediately starts firing endless questions at him about ships, how many he owns, and everything related to them, and he answers every single one. Out of nowhere, Eleanor asks whether she thinks the Royalists or the Republicans will win the Civil War. Irina responds by asking how she's supposed to know when she's not an astrologist. He explains the current situation to her, including his strategy of staying neutral for now. Irina admits she's terrible at strategy, but says that while the Royalists might reclaim the monarchy, nobody can stop the flow of time. She explains it by comparing it to trying to stop ocean waves with your bare hands. Then she adds that her own father tried to go with the flow too and failed horribly, which makes Eleanor burst out laughing. Irina immediately calls him a jerk for laughing at her family's problems. Still laughing, he tells her that's not why he's laughing. When she asks what's so funny then, he simply says it's because he likes her. He likes that she doesn't blindly follow tradition and that she thinks for herself. Before Irina can even process that, she suddenly spots someone who looks like Ludwig. She immediately tries to go after him, but Eleanor stops her and practically begs her not to go. Eleanor pulls Irina so hard that the cape wrapped around her shoulders slips off. He tells her she can't go and reminds her how generous he's been to her. Irina demands that he let go of her hand, but instead of answering, he keeps staring at Ludwig, who's been watching them the entire time. Ludwig glares at Eleanor, and Eleanor smirks back at him. In his mind, Ludwig already lost. This time, he won't be taking Irina away from him. If Ludwig really wanted to protect something precious, then he should have become stronger. Weak people lose everything eventually. Irina tries to pull her hand free again, but still can't. Eleanor reminds her of their arrangement. Quietly, she asks if she's not even allowed to greet someone without his permission, and whether this is truly how he plans to treat her. She raises her hand like she's about to hit him, but stops when she notices that he's standing there completely still, almost like someone waiting to be punished. She wonders if he genuinely wouldn't care even if she slapped him. In that moment, she realizes Eleanor is no longer the small boy who almost got trampled on, or the silent child who stood there getting mocked. Yet somehow, she still feels sorry for him. So instead, she lowers her hand. Meanwhile, Eleanor thinks Irina still can't tell the difference between the weak and the strong. He doesn't care what made her heart soften just now because he plans to take things from here himself. All she has to do is open her heart to him a little, just like she did now. He takes off his jacket and wraps it around her shoulders again while staring at Ludwig, who eventually walks away hesitantly. Eleanor thinks that he'll do whatever it takes to win. He's fully prepared to become the villain if necessary, and that's nothing new to him. He's willing to dig into his enemies' weaknesses, learn every vulnerability they have, and use whatever methods he needs to come out on top. Weeks later, the maids line up outside as usual, and just like always, Eleanor stops in front of Irina. He asks how her visit to her father went the previous day, though the way he says father almost makes it sound like the Marquis is his father too. Irina thanks him for letting her visit, and he casually brings up how she wanted to switch her usual day off for another one, which immediately makes her glare at Hans. Eleanor tells her she shouldn't be asking the butler about things like that. If she wants to rest, then she should simply take the day off. Irina starts explaining that she's not really in a position to do that, but he cuts her off and tells her she absolutely is. He says he doesn't want her asking anyone for permission. In her head, though, she immediately thinks, "Except you." Then he asks where she's going. Instead of answering, Irina just glares at him while clenching her fists in annoyance. That's when Eleanor notices scratches on her hand. Without hesitation, he takes her hand and kisses the scratches while calmly saying that he understands and hopes she has a safe trip. Later, Irina, dressed in a beautiful dress and a flowered hat, says goodbye to the servants when a carriage suddenly arrives. Darren steps out, introduces himself to her, and explains that the master sent him to escort her to Ludwig's house. During the carriage ride, Darren keeps smiling at Irina while she quietly wonders how he's supposedly a viscount, because, to her, he doesn't look noble at all. Honestly, everyone around Eleanor seems gloomy in one way or another. Breaking the silence, Darren suddenly says that Eleanor is a very peculiar person. Then he explains that he has known Eleanor since childhood because he was once responsible for taking care of him for a short time. One day, a young Eleanor approached him asking for something. Darren assumed the kid wanted a favor, but Eleanor immediately clarified that it wasn't a favor. It was a deal. Darren would teach him how to fight, and in exchange, Eleanor promised he would make Darren a noble someday. Irina points out that this means Darren knew Eleanor before he was accepted into the Count's household. Darren happily agrees and says the two of them are so close that there are practically no secrets between them. That makes Irina realize their relationship started back when Eleanor was still living on the streets. Darren then starts rambling about how cute and strangely obsessive Eleanor was as a child, maybe even worse than he is now. He says Eleanor absolutely hated people touching him. If someone touched him by accident, he would get unbelievably irritated. That completely surprises Irina because she never noticed any of that. Darren insists he's telling the truth and explains that even now, despite being a noble, Eleanor refuses to let anyone help dress him. Irina finally asks why Darren is even telling her all this. Darren says there's no special reason, but he wanted her to understand that Eleanor's childhood was far more inhumane than that of most nobles. Irina immediately replies that having a terrible childhood still doesn't give Eleanor the right to make other people miserable, and Darren doesn't need to hand her some tragic backstory just to explain his behavior. Her response leaves Darren completely speechless. A few minutes later, they arrive at Ludwig's house. Ludwig asks why she came, and she tells him she was worried about him. He offers her a seat and prepares tea for both of them. Irina asks whether he was at the harbor that day to see a doctor, and Ludwig confirms it. Then she carefully asks if he was upset because she left without greeting him. When he doesn't answer right away, she immediately starts panicking a little. But before she can keep talking, Ludwig suddenly tells her not to come to his house anymore. Confused, Irina asks if he's basically telling her to go to Eleanor instead, calling him a jerk in the process. Ludwig suddenly raises his voice and says, Eleanor can give her everything he never could. Even her own father wants her with Eleanor. He also says that one day she'll regret not choosing him. That immediately upsets Irina. She tells him she has never been afraid of regret, but Ludwig admits that he is. Irina stands up and says she honestly wishes she hadn't come to see him today, though she'll return once he calms down. She also apologizes for what happened at the harbor. Ludwig can't understand why she's apologizing when she didn't do anything wrong. Then, just before she reaches the door, he suddenly grabs her and kisses her. Later, when Irina steps outside, Darren immediately notices that her lips are swollen. Darren immediately starts pulling out his sword and marches toward Ludwig's house, saying he's going to handle the situation. Irina quickly stops him, insisting that nothing happened and they should just leave. Darren argues that dealing with things like this is literally his job, but Irina fires back that it's her business, not his. Then she tells him she's far too honest to lie to him anyway. Later that night, Irina sits on her bed thinking about what happened with Ludwig. Right after he kissed her, she shoved him away and yelled no, demanding to know why he was suddenly acting like that. Ludwig let go of her immediately, covered his face with his hands, and told her to leave because he didn't think he was in his right mind. Back in the present, Eleanor walks into her room and casually sits on her bed. Irina clearly doesn't like that, but she's too tired to argue with him about it. He gently holds her face and tells her she should have put medicine on her lips. She brushes it off, saying, "They're only a little swollen." Eleanor replies that anyone would be upset if something precious to them got damaged. Irina instantly gets annoyed at him for talking about her like she's some kind of object. He quickly explains that he didn't mean it like that at all. What he meant was that she's precious to him, so she should never let herself get hurt. Then he adds that there are very few things he truly cherishes, which is exactly why he gets angry whenever something happens to them. Irina pokes him in the forehead while scolding him for the weird way he talks, then tries to kick him out of her room. Eleanor just stares at her, thinking she doesn't look very happy for someone who just visited the person she supposedly loves so much. Then he asks if she really wouldn't consider trying things with him someday. He leans in so close it looks like he's about to kiss her, but Irina immediately starts smacking his hand over and over again instead. Completely unfazed, he tells her to think about it whenever she has some free time, then finally leaves the room. The second the door closes, Irina grabs a pillow and throws it at the door while yelling in frustration. About a week later, Irina is angrily washing a blanket by stomping all over it while mentally calling Ludwig every insult she can think of. She had gone back to see him, but he refused to meet her. Now she's wondering if he plans to avoid her forever. In her mind, they need to see each other and apologize properly because that's the only way they can move forward. Eleanor spots her aggressively stomping the blanket and walks over to ask if she isn't cold. She jumps in surprise because between all the stomping and her own thoughts, she never even heard him approach. He notices how red her feet are, lifts her straight out of the tub, and places her on the pavement nearby. Then he grabs one of her feet, complains about how freezing it is, and tells her to stop doing this kind of work. When she stays silent, he immediately realizes she has no intention of listening to him. Eleanor hates the cold more than anything because he spent too long living in freezing conditions. At some point, he stopped even feeling pain and genuinely thought he would eventually lose every other emotion too. Then he met Irina. Ever since that happened, he couldn't stand seeing her suffer. He notices her soaked clothes and wants to take them off so she won't get sick, but instead he ends up taking off his own coat to cover her. Then he pulls out a handkerchief, and Irina instantly recognizes it as the same one she gave him back at the academy. While gently wiping her foot with it, she can't stop wondering why he still kept it after all this time. Irina realizes something strange. Eleanor has proposed to her 3 separate times, yet he has never once asked if she actually has feelings for him. She feels like he avoids asking because hearing the answer would make everything real and force him to face the weight of it. To her, it feels like the two of them are just lying to themselves now. More than anything, she wants him to let her go and allow her to be free. Love that can never be returned should be allowed to rest. So in her mind, it's finally time to end things properly. Over the following days, Ludwig sends Irina several apology letters. She doesn't want to think about what happened that day, but she also can't pretend it never happened. Deep down, she knows that she and Ludwig can never return to the relationship they once had. That brings things back to the beginning, with Irina telling Eleanor that she wants to marry Ludwig. She promises him that marrying Ludwig won't interfere with her work at the house. Eleanor tells her that she didn't come to his house just to work and earn a salary. According to him, theirs was never a normal employer and employee relationship, which means she isn't free to do whatever she wants. He reminds her that he paid off her debt, takes care of her father, and even allowed her to work jobs that clearly don't suit her. Then he reminds her that he already told her once that he knows she doesn't love him, which is why he never expected her heart in the first place. That's also why he allowed her to keep seeing Ludwig and giving him money. But then he tells her one thing very clearly. She cannot marry anyone except him. He tells her he will come to her room and that she is not to lock her door. As Eleanor leaves the dining room, Irina starts throwing things around while the servants rush in trying to calm her down. Eleanor tells Hans to send word to Ludwig, saying he wishes to see him. Hans asks what he plans to do, and Eleanor replies that he will show Ludwig exactly what kind of man he is. Later that night, Eleanor arrives at Irina's room just as he said he would. She has left the door wide open, which he immediately complains about. She tells him he really annoys her, but she doesn't even feel like punching him because it isn't worth the effort. He tells her that Ludwig is not as faithful or as self-sacrificing as she believes. She angrily asks what he did to Ludwig, and Eleanor says Ludwig isn't worth his time or energy. He only gave him an opportunity to make a choice. Then he asks if she still plans to go to Ludwig's house, and when she says yes, he tells her not to go. Some time ago, when the civil war broke out in Impanon, Irina's father, Marquis Nordiak, began looking for a husband for her, and Eleanor was the first to propose. He promised to support her family and told her that even if she didn't find him appealing, she could simply use him for his money. But Irina told him he couldn't buy everything with money. The next day, Irina goes to Ludwig's house, and he breaks up with her. He tells her he received money from Eleanor and plans to get more. He says he will keep taking Eleanor's money until Carol is better. Irina is stunned. She can't understand how he can accept Eleanor's money knowing everything she's been through working in his house. She turns away and tells him to have a good life. As she walks off, she thinks about how Ludwig was always by her side. She tried so hard to make things work because she couldn't imagine leaving him, no matter how hopeless things looked. But in the end, he betrayed her and chose family and money instead. She understands now that it isn't just about money, it's about the way he thinks. She breaks down crying in the middle of the street as people stare, but she doesn't care. She feels sorry that she pushed Ludwig into making that choice, that she didn't notice how exhausted he was, that he was already ready to let go, and that she didn't protect him when she should have. Later that night, Eleanor reads while waiting for Irina to return home. He asks Hans where she is, and Hans replies that she is still at the tavern. Suddenly, they hear something crash down the hallway. Hans goes to check and finds a drunk Irina who has broken a vase. She crouches to pick up the pieces when Eleanor asks what she is doing. She tells him to take the cost of the vase from her pay. He pulls her up and tries to send her to her room, but she slaps his hand away and asks if it's really his place to tell her when and where to go. He replies that it is, since she can't even stand properly. She slaps him again and starts ranting about how he and Ludwig had no right to end her relationship. She asks if he is satisfied now, and if this is what he calls love. She shouts at him, then tells him to do whatever he wants. Eleanor knows he should refuse, but for once he's almost relieved that he's a terrible person. He tells her to wait for him in her room. Later, Eleanor arrives in Irina's room and tells her that if she doesn't want this, he will leave. Irina, however, thinks she is doing this out of revenge for the first time in her life, and she doesn't care what he does to her. He starts taking off his shirt, revealing the scars across his back. When she asks about them, he says it's nothing, and asks if she finds it disgusting. She says she didn't mean it like that, and he tells her to focus on what they are doing. He complains that she smells like alcohol, and she tells him not to kiss her. He just laughs, says it doesn't affect him at all, and kisses her anyway. After that, they become intimate for the first time. The next morning, Eleanor watches Irina sleep, thinking she has always been cute even when she was yelling at his bullies. He remembers her words from their graduation day and thinks about that moment often. Then he quietly apologizes, both for wanting her this much and for ruining her love. The next day, Eleanor waits for Irina in the dining room so they can have breakfast together as usual, but she never shows up. So Eleanor ends up not eating. After that, he heads out with his team who are talking, though he isn't really listening. Suddenly, he stops by a window and sees Irina trimming a tree while the gardener praises her work. Irina chats with the gardener, completely unaware that Eleanor is watching. When she finishes, she decides to take the clippings to the rabbits. But as she steps down from the ladder, she slips and falls straight into Eleanor's arms. He asks if she isn't supposed to be resting today. She pulls away and says that's not her decision to make. But he pulls her back and asks how she's feeling and whether her back is sore. She panics and accuses him of trying to make what happened between them obvious while servants are around. He tells her she was the one who made it public the previous day, and that he was the one who sent the servants away. After a moment of silence, he asks if she is going to keep working. She asks in return if she's not allowed to anymore. He wonders why she refuses to make her life easier. People assume she is just being stubborn and think she should either leave as a servant or become his mistress. In their eyes, being loved by the head of the trade union is better than being a servant or a debtor. Irina asks Eleanor if she can still work, and he says yes. He turns her to face him and pulls her closer. She asks if he wasn't on his way out, and instead of answering, he leans in as if to kiss her. She quickly dodges and asks what has gotten into him. He says he is trying to figure that out. She reminds him they are outside, and he asks if she would stay with him if they were inside. She starts to wonder why he keeps giving her choices when he clearly holds all the power. As the days pass, Eleanor begins taking Irina to his room, saying it's bigger and more comfortable. One night, they end up together for so long that Irina eventually begs him to stop, and he does. In the middle of the night, Irina quietly gets out of bed, not realizing Eleanor is awake and watching. She goes into the garden and starts laughing softly. Eleanor reaches out toward her, then stops when he hears her speaking words of affirmation in Ilian. There have been times when Irina is angry with Ludwig and resents Eleanor, even though she doesn't want to feel that way toward anyone. There are also days when she is desperate to earn enough money to pay off her debt, and other days when money feels so dirty she doesn't even want to touch it. She keeps repeating her words of affirmation until she notices Eleanor standing there. He wraps a blanket around her, and she asks why he came outside. He says it's because she wasn't by his side, and in his mind he admits that the idea of not having her nearby makes him uneasy. She says she just needed some air. He leads her back inside, but on the way he glances at something with a suspicious look. The next day at the trade union headquarters, Darren informs Eleanor that the Imphanon trade union is offering advance payment for goods from ships that left just a month ago. Eleanor isn't pleased with the news. He explains that it isn't even certain all 3 ships will arrive safely, since the journey is long, and if any crew members fall ill with malaria, they may not be replaced. Malaria is a disease that causes bleeding, loss of teeth, and sudden death, and strangely, it only seems to affect sailors. Darren adds that Imphanon likely wants to secure the cargo early because supplies are running low due to the war, and he worries they might lose a profitable deal because Eleanor is being too cautious. But Eleanor suspects the Imphanon trade union may already be working with the royalists, and that these supplies could help them win the war. He remembers Irina's words about the flow of time and tells Darren to delay the advance payment and any contracts as much as possible for now. The next morning at breakfast, Irina is served salad, which she, of course, refuses. She calls Eleanor a picky eater, and he corrects her, saying he isn't picky, he just doesn't enjoy food the way she does. He says he eats only to survive, which confuses her a little. Then he explains that his nutritionist, after 10 years of research, concluded that a varied diet is more sensible, so she eats. After their breakfast argument, Eleanor invites Irina to visit the shops and facilities the trade union has invested in, saying he thinks she will enjoy it. But when they arrive, Irina doesn't find it fun at all. She walks around the storage area, commenting that everything looks like low-quality fabric. Then, she notices a sewing machine and asks what it is. Eleanor explains it to her and adds that the inventor's life was in danger, so he brought him into the trade union and secured a deal. Tailors feared the machine would replace them, so they burned down the inventor's home. He continues, saying he doesn't think they will be able to stop clothing prices from falling, so they are developing standard sizing based on the most common measurements in Kisan. The goal is to mass-produce clothing in advance and sell it to the public. He adds that he isn't fashionable like Irina, so he isn't sure whether people will accept this idea or not. Irina thinks it will be difficult to succeed. Her reasoning is that people don't like looking the same, And that difference is what has kept social life and the caste system going until now. She also points out that one standard size won't be enough. Eleanor needs at least 3 or 4 sizes. Otherwise, the clothes will end up looking like potato sacks and nobody will wear them. She suggests they start with things like miners' uniforms, pajamas, or winter outerwear that doesn't need precise sizing. Then, she talks about how trends always change. People no longer wear royal gowns with tight waists and heavy skirts. Instead, they prefer simple white dresses without puffed designs. She thinks this shift could be useful for business. After that, they go to the docks, where the bodies of sailors who died from malaria at sea are being taken away. Eleanor explains that the disease only affects sailors, and many of them believe it is a curse meant only for seamen, but neither he nor Irina believes in superstition, since they are both educated. They think it is simply a problem that hasn't been solved yet. He mentions that about 1,000 years ago, people believed red hair like Irina's was a bad omen. Even her grandmother, despite her high status, never left the house without covering her hair. Eleanor then tells Irina that her hair color suits her very well. Next, they go to Kisana, an area close to where Irina used to live and where she often visited. Eleanor owns 30% of the shops there, and half of the ones he doesn't own still sell his products. Irina walks around pointing out designs and styles that don't work, even criticizing a painting. Suddenly, Eleanor asks if she would be interested in working at the trade union. He tells her he has no hidden motives and that it would be better for her financially, even though he doesn't like saying it that way. Irina asks why he is bringing it up now, and he explains that nobles usually look down on this kind of work. If she works outside his house, people might mock her. She points out that he is also a merchant, and he replies that it doesn't bother him, but he thought it might bother her. She says it doesn't bother her at all. Then she tells him she can do the job, that she can do whatever he can do. The following night, Eleanor brushes Irina's hair while she asks if she can start her training at the general store on Kisana Street. He tells her that his original plan was for her to work at the headquarters as a contractor, translator, or bookkeeper. He also explains that the shop is in a poor location, the stock is not great, and sales are only average, so it isn't considered important to the trade union. Irina doesn't argue, but she pouts. In the end, he reluctantly agrees, on the condition that she always prioritizes her safety. If any dangerous situation comes up, she must put herself first, even if it feels cowardly or dishonorable to her. Irina gets the feeling that Eleanor has been holding back a little around her lately, like he's keeping something to himself. He takes her hand and asks if she agrees, and she nods. The next morning, the maids rush out as usual when Eleanor leaves the house. He looks around for Irina and finds her hiding behind a pillar. He asks if she isn't coming, and she says she is. She waves at the maids, feeling a bit strange about leaving the house with Eleanor like this. He takes her hand and helps her into the carriage. When they arrive at the store, Irina can barely hide her excitement. Eleanor places the trade union badge on her, then immediately starts giving her instructions on what to do if anything goes wrong. He tells her to run out of the store right away if there is danger. He also explains that there are undercover trade union men nearby, and that the Capitol guards will treat her well as long as she has the badge, but the men he stationed will be even more helpful. Irina notices how worried he looks, but before she can say anything, he pushes her out of the carriage and tells one of his men to escort her into the shop. Later, she comes back and invites him to go out for something delicious after work, saying it will be her treat. He agrees. Irina stands in front of the store, excited about her first day of work. A woman comes out and introduces herself as Susan. She explains that the trade union said they would send someone to help with store management. Irina tells her she is inexperienced and is only there to learn, which disappoints Susan a little. Still, she doesn't say anything. She remembers seeing Irina checking the shops with the head of the trade union. Susan gives Irina a tour of the store, and Irina immediately notices a pretty container. When she asks about it, Susan explains it is hair oil from the East. She adds that she wishes they had more of it because many customers ask for it, but supply is limited and difficult to get for a small shop like theirs. Then Irina notices an old damaged armor and asks about that too. Susan explains that the armor belonged to the Gershwin people, a small tribal group from another continent that has nearly gone extinct. It was worn by a soldier during the final war. Irina asks if Susan bought it, and Susan says the previous owner of the store acquired it. As Irina walks around, she keeps finding more ridiculous items, like potions said to protect against curses that don't work, seeds that supposedly bring fortune, and the most absurd of all, a dragon's toenail. A few days later, Irina is laughing hard as she tells Eleanor about everything being sold in the store. He tells her it's getting late and asks how long she needs for product research. He complains that she is working too hard and suggests they go to bed, and she reluctantly agrees. Normally, they would be intimate, but today she is too tired. Still, she doesn't feel like she has the right to refuse him. As if he can read her thoughts, he tells her he knows she is tired and only wants to talk. Then he asks if she is finding the work difficult. She says it's fine, but she wishes there was something she could actually do. There is still so much she doesn't know, and she wants to do something that truly benefits Eleanor. She quietly says she really wants to do well. Eleanor tells her to be patient. She asks why he bought the shop, and he says he received it as payment from the previous owner, who suddenly died. He adds that the death was suspicious and that he believes it was murder, as many others do as well. That shocks Irina. Eleanor warns her that many merchants hold grudges, so she needs to be careful, and reminds her again of the instructions he gave her. The next day at work, Martin, Eleanor's bully from the academy, shows up at the store. As Martin walks into the store, he brings up the last time he saw Irina, which was the time she went to ask him for money. Susan notices the tension in the store and offers to show Martin around the store, but he shuts her down by calling her disrespectful for interrupting a noble. Then he asks Irina if she is a noble. Irina ignores his question and tells him to buy what he wants and go. He laughs, saying he only came because he heard she was working there. Then he brings up Eleanor, asking if she is living with him and what happened to Ludwig. He also starts talking about Eleanor being born by a prostitute to a father who pays for women. Irina remembers her father telling her to think 3 times before she acts, but she ignores it. She tells Martin that she used not to understand how Eleanor tolerated his senseless bullying, but now she does. She says Eleanor tolerated it because he is a germaphobe and can't stand touching dirty things, but she is not a germaphobe. Then, she kicks him so hard, shocking Susan. But Irina doesn't stop there. She proceeds to continue beating Martin. Susan runs out of the store and calls for help. The who come to help struggle to pull Irina away from Martin. She bites him and he punches her in the face. The men manages to drag Martin outside while Irina curses him out. When she calms down, Susan looks at the bruise on her face, and Irina says she thinks she hurt Martin more than he hurt her. Then Susan slaps her shoulder. Just then, Eleanor enters the store. He holds Irina's face and asks her if he forgot to tell her not to handle things on her own and go outside and ask for help. She says Susan did that, and he angrily asks her what about her. When she doesn't answer, he asks her why she did what she did if Martin ridiculed her. She doesn't say anything, but she thinks that Martin mocked Eleanor and she refuses to put up with it like Eleanor. He touches her face and puts his finger in her mouth. Susan coughs, and Eleanor quickly pulls away, saying that thankfully, there is no damage in Irina's mouth. Then he asks her why she bit Martin and if she is a dog. He also asks if Martin isn't dirty to her. Irina remembers her earlier germ comment and starts laughing, but stops when Eleanor glares at her. He tells her it will be difficult for Martin to come back to the store, but just in case she ever sees him again, he would rather she kicks him hard in the crotch. The next day, Irina arrives at the shop before Susan, and Susan is surprised when she shows up early. Susan thinks that the previous day, Irina seemed extremely hot-tempered and stubborn, but seeing her get so angry for someone else actually moved her. Irina, meanwhile, feels like she has grown closer to Susan. Susan asks why Irina is writing the name of the shop, and Irina says she wants to change it. She asks if Susan will still hear her out, even if it sounds ridiculous. Susan agrees, and at that moment, some women enter the store, so she goes to attend to them. Irina hears them asking about the hair oil and thinks that while the oil itself is effective, it is people's instincts that make it popular. The product has a unique scent no one has experienced before, and the fact that women in a foreign land use it makes others want to buy it too. She gets an idea and quickly starts writing it down. Then another lady enters the store. Irina goes to help her as she moves around and ends up choosing between 2 hats, a purple one and a blue one. She asks Irina which color is more popular, but Irina admits she doesn't know. She still chooses the blue one because it suits the woman better. The lady buys it, while Susan quietly watches Irina. That night, Irina reads a book titled The Passion of the Gershwin. She complains that the book isn't for her, and Eleanor reminds her that she learned Ilian because she once loved Il's literature. She says she only reads what is fun for her and could never read nonfiction like he does. He replies that he doesn't read for pleasure, only because it is useful. She asks about the Gershwin people, and he repeats what Susan already told her, adding that he has heard they no longer have their own land and wander aimlessly. When he asks why she is interested in them, she says it's because she needs to understand them a little in order to sell Gershwin goods at the shop. Eleanor tells her she doesn't need to go that far, and that the people coming to the store are not smarter than her. She disagrees, saying people can tell. Then she excitedly tells him she changed the shop name and asks if he wants to see the sign with her the next day. When the next day arrives, Irina proudly reveals the new shop name, Irina's General Store of Mystery that you will lose sleep over. Eleanor tells Irina that he doesn't like the name. She assumes it's because it's too long, but that isn't the issue. He says he dislikes it because it sounds too suggestive. Irina points out that the emphasis is on general, but he says he understands that. Yet there will still be sleazy men who interpret it differently. Irina says she doesn't mind that as long as it brings customers into the shop. She tries to convince him, saying they need a humorous approach because the shop isn't in a good location and they need curiosity to draw people in. He notices some posters in her hand, and she says she plans to take them to a local pub and hang them up there. That night, Irina returns to the mansion late, and as soon as she enters, Eleanor notices she has been drinking. She explains she only had one drink while putting up posters at the pub. He tells her she doesn't need to do things like that herself since she has employees, but she says she feels more comfortable doing it on her own. She also mentions that she bought drinks for everyone at the pub. As a merchant who started from the bottom himself, Eleanor understands what she is trying to do. He thinks there is no other noble lady like her and recognizes that she has a strange talent for business. Suddenly, Irina asks if he knows what sailors need. She suggests a wide-brim hat to protect them from the sun. Eleanor says sailors don't usually care about things like that and suggests more practical goods like water canteens or dried meat instead. When he asks why she's bringing it up, she says she'll tell him later. Then she falls asleep on the chair, and he carries her to bed. A few days later, Irina puts up holy texts for sailors. It took a lot of effort to obtain them, but she managed it. In Kisan, religion plays a major role in the oppression and prejudice against red hair, and their sermons also discourage pleasure, even in food. Irina despises the monastery, and Eleanor knows this well, which is why he doesn't like the idea. He tells her there was no need to go so far just to obtain the holy texts, and asks if he has been putting too much pressure on her to show results. She says she will do whatever it takes, and asking for favors means nothing to her. He tells her to get rid of the potions she already collected, but she refuses, saying she can turn them into profit. He insists that no amount of money is worth her effort. She responds that no one else sees her the way he does, and that the only way she can measure her time and effort is through profit. In that moment, Eleanor realizes how cold and hopeless the world must have felt to Irina after she lost everything, with no one there to comfort her. She tells him again that she will do it and pay him back. He wants to tell her that he doesn't want her to repay him at all, that he only wants to be part of her life, and that he only needed an excuse to stay close to her. Back in the present, Irina sets up a display for sailors. She places out canteens and dried meat, then sets a cup down and tells Susan to give samples to every sailor who comes in. She also gives instructions on how to sell the holy texts and potions, which don't sell well. The potion is said to offer protection and comes from the monastery, but only a few sailors actually believe in it and buy it. Susan quietly replaces the sample cup with a smaller one, and Irina is impressed. After that, Irina moves on to the women's section. She dresses a mannequin in a trending chemise dress with a headband, then asks Susan if she should switch it for a hat. Susan asks why she is pairing the dress with accessories like that. Irina explains that since the dress has a low neckline, women will want to tie their hair up and show their necks, and because the dress is plain, they'll need accessories. She plans different combinations too: headbands with deep necklines, thin muslin dresses with shawls and gowns, and puffy short sleeves with long gloves. Later, at the trade union headquarters, Eleanor receives a report on Irina's work for the day. She visited the warehouse and then spent the rest of her time at the shop. On her own, she sold 2 hats, 1 travel book, 1 ointment, 3 pairs of gloves, and 27 bottles of potion. That last part surprises Eleanor. The way she is selling things almost makes him believe the potions actually work. Weeks later, Irina and Eleanor walk through the garden, admiring the flowers she had the gardener plant. She plans to dry them into perfume sachets, which are becoming popular among women in Imphanon. The shop has cleared out more than half of its bad stock, and sales are rising quickly. It is now the top-selling store on Kasana Street. Eleanor tells her she is an incredible person. Irina suddenly raises her voice, saying she wasn't taken seriously when she had no money, but now that she is earning well, people are finally praising her and that makes her feel sad. He asks if that is what his words made her feel, and she quickly says no, she didn't mean him. He hands her flowers and tells her he has never looked down on her for not having money. To him, she has always been the same. Irina takes the flowers but says she doesn't like them. He replies that he didn't give them to her because he thought she would like them, but because they suit her when she holds them and they do. He says he hopes she will stay by his side, smiling. Days later, Eleanor visits Irina at the shop and tells her that her father has passed away. On the day of Irina's father's funeral, people are surprised by how lavish the funeral for a fallen noble is. Most of the attendees are there because Count Schuberg personally made the announcement. Irina wonders how long it has been since she last saw her father before he passed. She had been so busy with the shop that she rarely visited him. Years ago, back at the academy, the day after she defended Eleanor from Martin, she had gone home. Her father, Hector Nordiak, was overjoyed to see her. He called what she did mischief, and she insisted it wasn't. She had simply punished a brainless blonde boy for doing something dirty. She also told him about being scolded by her mother, which made him laugh. He then brought her to the balcony and showed her their vast land, speaking about how times were changing and how he needed to find where the future was heading and invest in it. Now Irina finally understands what he meant that day. Her father had seen the future before anyone else did. Overwhelmed, she collapses to the ground crying, and Eleanor holds her. At the end of the funeral, Laurel Fordern, Ludwig's younger sister, approaches Irina while she is with Eleanor. Irina thanks her for attending, and Laurel apologizes on behalf of the rest of her family who couldn't come. She begins to mention Ludwig, but when she notices Eleanor's cold stare, she stops herself, and instead thanks him for what he is doing for her sister Carol. Eleanor says nothing and simply turns away, and Laurel quietly says her goodbyes. Irina scolds Eleanor for his behavior toward Laurel. Eleanor replies that the Viscount and Viscountess Fordern should have at least attended the funeral considering what Hector Nordiak had done for them. Irina feels disappointed in them as well, but says nothing. She only thanks Eleanor for helping her send her father off without it feeling pitiful. Days later at the trade union headquarters, Darren shows Eleanor Carroll's medical record and tells him to look at the last page. Eleanor visibly flinches when he sees it, then tells Darren not to get involved and not to tell Irina. Darren agrees, but warns him not to keep what he has just seen a secret. Days later at breakfast, Eleanor notices Irina isn't eating and asks why. He has already noticed that since her father's funeral, she has had little energy and often seems depressed. Later, Eleanor shows up at Irina's shop even though it isn't close to closing time yet. Irina points that out and he tells her not to mind him, he will just look around. While observing the store, he notices a change in one of the dresses on a mannequin. Surprised he even caught it, Irina tells him she raised the waistline slightly. He says she wore a dress like that the day they went to the harbor, though Irina doesn't remember. She starts explaining how the lighter design is helping sales. Since women are buying more shawls and gloves, those items are selling so fast they can't keep them in stock as the weather gets colder. Later, Eleanor asks what she plans to do on her day off. She says she will rest since she has no friends, which she notes is something she has in common with him. Then she adds that she has been thinking of visiting her parents' house. Just then, a man enters the shop, and Susan notices the Gershwin symbol on his shirt. Irina shows him the armor, and they begin talking about it. Not long after, the impressed customer leaves with the armor. Irina and Susan celebrate finally selling it, while Eleanor just silently watches Irina. The next day, Irina goes through the shop records while having tea with Eleanor. She says she thinks sales have slowed down. Eleanor tells her it is still the highest level of sales expected for a shop that size. Then Irina introduces her new idea for the store. She wants to turn it into a social gathering place for noble women using a membership system. Customers would pay a deposit in advance and then buy items using that balance until it runs out. To make it attractive, she suggests an incentive. If they deposit 100,000 Kizan dollars, they can purchase goods worth 110,000. She also plans to provide refreshments for members. With the deposited money, she could invest or expand the shop's products. When Eleanor stays silent, she panics, thinking he dislikes the idea, and starts rambling about how she understands the risks and won't lose money. She even begs him to let her try. Instead, Eleanor is impressed, and he compliments her. The following day at the store, Irina is about to leave for the pub to put up more posters when Susan expresses concern about the new plan. Irina reassures her that people will catch on quickly once they see what they stand to gain. At that moment, Laurel enters the store. After exchanging pleasantries, Laurel says she was sad she couldn't speak to Irina on the day of the funeral and that she also wanted to see the shop, which she heard was doing well. She praises the store, then tells Irina that Ludwig isn't doing well. She pleads with her to support him. Laurel asks Irina to go see her brother, and Irina politely refuses, saying it is best if she and Ludwig don't meet. Laurel asks if she can still visit Irina, and Irina tells her she is welcome anytime. After Laurel leaves, Irina tells herself she did the right thing. That night, as soon as Irina gets home, Eleanor meets her at the door and asks why Laurel came to see her, surprising her. She asks how he knows about Laurel's visit, and he says it is because he increased the number of men stationed outside the shop. He then asks what Laurel said. Irina says she was working and Laurel simply came by, and asks if that is really something she needs to be questioned about. Eleanor continues anyway, asking if Laurel was bold enough to ask her to see her brother. When a still shocked Irina says yes, Eleanor asks if Ludwig is dying or something. Irina tries to tell him she is not going to see Ludwig, who she calls Louis, and Eleanor doesn't like that. He goes on a rant about how Irina's father helped Ludwig's family, and in return Ludwig betrayed Irina for money. He then tells Irina to turn Laurel away if she comes again. Irina tells Eleanor he shouldn't be so harsh and that she never planned to see Ludwig. Eleanor fires back that if she can't even turn Laurel away, she should close the shop. Irina starts crying, and Eleanor immediately begins apologizing. She tells him she can't forgive him and asks why he is doing this to her when there is nothing between them. Eleanor asks how she can say that after spending countless nights in bed with him. She reminds him that he said he only wanted her body, and he asks if she is saying that is all there is between them. He also asks if she truly believes she has no feelings for him. He tells her she can't be with another man and asks if she hates him even more. She says she doesn't hate him, and he replies that she also doesn't love him. She wants to tell him that isn't true, but something about their relationship makes it hard to say the word. Every now and then, she looks into her heart, which feels hazy and cold. One day, while looking into the harshness inside her, she sees a single sprout pushing through. She wonders what that plant is called, or if it even has a name at all, and it leaves her heart uneasy. On a rainy evening, a few days later, Susan tells Irina to go home while she locks up the shop, since Irina has been going home late. Irina says Eleanor wants to have dinner before heading home, so she is waiting for him. Susan then tells her that Laurel came to the shop on Irina's day off and bought a tea known to be good for bronchial tubes. She also mentions that Laurel's older brother is sick. He has contracted whatever Carol had. Irina is so shocked that her pen falls from her hand. At that moment, Eleanor enters the shop, apologizing for being late. He takes one look at Irina and immediately knows something is wrong. She remembers when he asked her whether Ludwig was dying, then asked him whether he already knew. Irina loses control, while Eleanor asks if this new information about Ludwig has changed her mind and if she feels pity for him. He had thought that if Irina found out about Ludwig, she would ask him for money. He wonders if he will save her past love and use it to push her further into debt with him. In the days that follow, Irina sits in a depressed state that even worries the servants. One day, Eleanor tells her to just ask him for help, to plead and beg, and that when she asks him for something, he has no choice but to help. Then he asks her what she will offer him in exchange this time. She lives in his manor. She has given him her body, and she already gives him her time, even though she hates him. So, what will she sacrifice next? He promises to get Ludwig treatment and says it will cost him nothing. Irina tells him she will not go to Ludwig and that she does not want to make Eleanor feel miserable. She says she will help Ludwig in her own way, since she earns enough to do so. Then she asks if he will let her do that without making things complicated. Irina thinks that she might regret this and that Ludwig may die, and wonders what would happen if that happens. She also thinks she cannot tell Eleanor that she likes him because words cannot properly describe what their relationship has become. She does not know if a future will ever come when those words will make sense between them. She tells Eleanor they should stop adding conditions to their relationship, and he agrees. That winter, Ludwig Fordern passed away. The House of Schuberg hosts a small funeral for him. Days later, Irina is sitting by the beach when Eleanor arrives and wraps a coat around her. He apologizes for being the one responsible for tainting her love. But seeing her like this makes him realize that the love reached its end through her own ruin. She will live with the heavy guilt and never be free of Ludwig's memory. He tells her she can resent him and that she did nothing wrong. He wishes she would resent him. That night, Irina goes to the cemetery, and Eleanor follows her. She stands before her parents' grave, talking to them. The rain starts falling, and Irina drops to the ground, crying and telling her father how cruel he is for not living longer. She also talks about how much she wanted to succeed and let him know that everything that happened wasn't his fault. After that, she moves to Ludwig's grave. She apologizes for blaming him for their breakup and says that if he hadn't been in such a dire situation, he wouldn't have done it. Eleanor asks her why she doesn't blame him. He asks her how he can beg for forgiveness while resting his head on her shoulder. A few days later, at breakfast, Irina tells Eleanor she wants to make a lot of money. She says they have been together for a while now and that she is finally admitting to herself that she and Eleanor are in a relationship. Even though it hasn't been sweet and she could never call it love, she still wants to succeed. Eleanor offers him her full support, and then she asks if she can go overseas for a while. A few days later, Eleanor gives Irina a certificate from the king reinstating and recognizing Irina's father as the Marquis of House Nordiak. He also tears up the certificate of her debts to him, saying he is setting her free. Then he kneels and begs her to stay by his side of her own free will. He begs her not to abandon him. That spring, Irina wraps up things at the shop and leaves the manor. When she arrives at the harbor, Eleanor takes her bag and walks with her toward the ship, saying he will send word to all the Schuberg trade union shops in Infanon. Then he asks if she remembers what she said when they graduated from the academy about seeing each other again. She says she does, and this time it is the same. As the ship leaves, Eleanor stands at the dock, tears in his eyes. Then he says aloud that he loves Irina. A month later, Eleanor asks Darren if there is any news from Infanon, and Darren tells him no, which only frustrates him more. Eleanor had planned that once Irina reached Infanon and connected with the trade union, he would support her from behind the scenes, whether that meant protecting her or secretly keeping an eye on her. But an entire month has passed and they still cannot find her. She never even went to the trade union. He orders Darren to send more men and find her. A few weeks earlier, Irina arrived at the Infanon port exhausted and terribly seasick. While looking around, she noticed a group of men arguing in Elaine while loading cargo onto a ship. She immediately figured out it was an Il's vessel. Right there, she decided she had to get on that ship. She had to go to Il's. In her mind, Infanon was already Keeson's trading partner and filled with trade unions, meaning there wasn't much new she could do there, but Il's was different. She asked the men if the ship was headed to Il's, but instead of answering, they asked who she was. Irina introduced herself, and a red-haired man named Nick said he wasn't asking for her name. Meanwhile, the other crew members whispered among themselves, shocked that she spoke fluent Ilian. Irina asked them to take her to Il's and promised she would make it worth their while. The men burst out laughing, and Nick explained that women were not allowed on merchant ships. Irina immediately demanded to know why. Before Nick could answer, a bald sailor suddenly put him in a chokehold and declared that bringing a woman aboard would make the jealous sea overturn the ship. Irina yelled at him, saying his thinking was ancient. Her shouting caught the attention of a man the crew called Your Grace. Irina found it strange since Il's no longer had titles. Still, he clearly seemed to be in charge, so she asked if she could board the ship. She promised to pay and even work if necessary. She didn't want to wait for another vessel because, judging from what the crew said, no other ship would take her either. Then, Irina dropped to her knees in front of him and begged to be allowed aboard. Your Grace observed that she must be from Keeson and definitely not a commoner. Irina introduced herself properly, and he asked why the daughter of a noble was kneeling in a place like that. He said it brought shame to her house and asked if she had no honor. Irina replied that she did not kneel because she lacked honor. She knelt because what she needed to achieve mattered more than honor, and once she accomplished her goal, honor would naturally follow. After hearing that, he told her to stand. Then he calmly announced that the ship would leave in 3 days and ordered Nick to prepare a room for her. Nick immediately started protesting, but Your Grace shut him down before he could continue. Meanwhile, Irina could only think of one thing. She was really going to Il's. In the present, Irina leans over the side of the ship and throws up from seasickness. She asks Nick for medicine, but he just yells at her instead. While they argue, the crew starts whispering that Irina might be a spy from another trade union, or just completely insane. The trade union ship Irina belongs to the Cyrilius trade union vessel, and the Archduke, Your Grace's middle name, is Cyrilius. When she first came aboard, he warned her about the kind of danger she could have faced if she had ended up on the wrong ship. He also warned her that sailors are savage men, and most of them barely know basic manners. He made it clear there was only so much he could do to protect her. After that, he told her that how she gets along with the sailors is entirely up to her. Back in her room, Irina thinks about how she still has not managed to get close to anyone on the ship. She knows the men see her as uncomfortable and unwelcome, and it annoys her badly. Still, she gets up with a determined attitude, ready to work. Then the ship suddenly rocks so hard that it crashes to the floor. She pulls herself back up and heads for the deck. The moment she steps outside, she realizes a massive storm is raging while the crew scrambles around trying not to die in the rough waters. Nick says they should never have allowed a woman on the ship. Irina immediately snaps back at him, but one of the crew members shoves her while backing Nick up. Another sailor grabs her and suggests tossing her overboard. She bites him and starts cursing like she has worked on ships her whole life. Your Grace steps in to defend her, and the sailor pushes her aside. In that moment, Irina realizes she will probably spend the rest of her life fighting prejudice. She gets back up, grabs a bucket, and starts throwing water out of the ship and back into the sea. She notices Nick staring at her and yells at him to stop standing there and actually do something. After the storm, Irina cleans the ship until it shines. Until now, she had always thought people feared the sea because they were ignorant, but now that she has experienced it, she realizes it is because the sea is so massive. She also understands why the men are so rough and uncivil. It is because if they do not act tough, they would be overwhelmed by fear. So when they reach land, they use their hard-earned money to get drunk and waste it on gambling. Later, as Irina has dinner with the Archduke, she asks him why he lives on the ship when he is not the captain but the head of a trade union. Your Grace laughs, and she tells him she knows someone like him, but that person never boards a ship. The Archduke explains that he once had a sickeningly large amount of money and became a merchant because he wanted to see a bigger world. At the time, Ils was more conservative than it is now, and he was frustrated with the imperial rules. The Archduke was a member of the imperial family. He is a distant cousin of the emperor, and they say he carries the title of the last Ils dynasty at the end of his full name. He left the imperial family and threw himself into trade. The crew still calls him Archduke out of respect. Irina compliments the food, and when the Archduke offers her more, she refuses and says she misses fruits and vegetables. Later, she stands on the deck thinking that Eleanor really spoiled her, and she never thought she would miss vegetables. Nick shows up and apologizes for earlier. She accepts his apology, saying she knows they all see her as a woman who forced her way aboard and that no one likes her, but she will do her best to stay out of everyone's way. He praises her cleaning skills and laughs at her Ilian accent, saying she sounds like she learned to speak from an older man or an old book, which is true. A month and a half into the journey, things have been going so smoothly that Irina is getting bored. But what she does not know is that this is the calm before the storm. While looking out her window toward the deck, she sees one of the crew members stagger and fall. She immediately runs out to check and asks what is wrong with him. Shortly after that, the ship's largest cabin is turned into an infirmary. Irina watches the crew as they care for the sick. She notices they seem almost used to it. She spots a man with a bleeding nose and moves in to help him. The men are bleeding, losing teeth, and blue and black marks start appearing on their skin. It reminds her of her conversation with Eleanor. Nick snaps her out of her thoughts and asks why she looks so down. She asks him if he is happy seeing all the sick people. He tells her it is normal on ships, and everyone knows what they sign up for. She starts scolding him for speaking so formally to her, and while they joke around, she notices the blue and black marks on his arms. As the days go by, the number of deaths keeps rising. The crew throws the bodies into the sea, and Nick explains that they cannot sail with dead bodies on board. Irina goes to the Archduke and asks him to provide her with the personal details of everyone on the ship, including those who have died. The Archduke's aide reminds him that Irina is a foreign woman and not related to any of the crew. The Archduke understands his aide's concern but still gives Irina all the information she needs. However, the papers are inaccurate, making it difficult to find answers about the disease. Most of the sailors have unclear lineage, and some lie about their identities. The trade union is not strict about who joins the crew. As the days pass, Irina helps around the ship while still trying to trace the cause of the disease. In her research, she notices some are stronger than others, and wonders if it is because some were born at sea and others on land. When that does not work, she theorizes that it could be because the healthy ones have stayed on the ship longer, but that does not make sense, because she is new on the ship and still healthy. She moves around the ship, scribbling notes everywhere. She even goes to the kitchen, where the very healthy head chef quickly drives her away. She returns to her room, reminding herself to write down what she has observed before she forgets. She goes to get a drink while still staring at her notes. Then she sees something that makes her look closer. That is when she realizes the problem is the food. In the morning, Irina steps out of her room, convinced it is the food. She believes the only difference between the healthy and the sick is what they eat, and she remembers Eleanor's lecture about food. She goes to the Archduke and demands that he anchor the ship. He tells her they need at least another month before they can find a place to dock. She says it can be anywhere, even a deserted island with edible fruit. She explains her theory about the food, and he asks if it will help them survive. She says she cannot be certain, but they have to try. The aide refuses, explaining that they cannot dock on a deserted island because they do not know what dangers might be there. He goes on and on about the risks and says they will stop at a small country to replace the men they lost. The Archduke then asks Irina if she is willing to take responsibility for her decision. 4 days later, they dock on a deserted island and the healthy crew members step out to forage for fruit. Irina tries to help, but she does not know what is edible, so she just helps arrange what the men bring back. She remembers the Archduke's question and thinks she is not sure. She knows her decision could cost more time and even more lives, but she cannot let fear stop her from acting. Later, in the ship's kitchen, she tries to reach a tub of sugar but cannot. The head chef helps her and asks if she is going to ferment the fruit in sugar. When she says yes, he tells someone else to do it and orders her to rest. She notices a broom in the corner, and as if the chef reads her mind, he tells her not to clean. When she leaves the kitchen, she sees a pile of clothes and tries to organize it, but one of the crew members stops her and says he will handle it. He then sits beside her. She thinks her relationship with the crew might have improved a little. The next day, Irina carries a jug of fruit juice to the sick men when one of the crew stops her and asks what she is carrying. She gets scared and tells him, quickly assuring him it is perfectly safe. He just looks at her and says he was only curious. After that, Irina feeds one of the sick men the juice, while thinking about turning the rest of the fruit into jam, so it does not go bad. Just then, she hears a gunshot. She stands up to check, but the sick man she is caring for holds her back. She realizes she is the only one who can move around freely. She tells him she is only going to check and not to worry. When she opens the door, she sees the men fighting pirates. Before she can react, one of the pirates drags her out. A crewman sees her in trouble and calls Nick for help, but before anyone arrives, Irina kicks the pirate hard in the groin. Everyone freezes as the pirate collapses in pain. The crewman pushes her back inside and tells her to lock the door. She sits on the floor and listens to the fight until it ends. The crew opens the door, laughing and praising her bravery. One of them tells her she should not do that again and asks if she wants to die in vain after saving so many lives. As the days go by, the crew becomes brighter and more cheerful, indicating they are getting close to their homeland. Irina feels the same excitement. She jumps around on the deck in joy. Later, she lies down thinking about how she has been seeing more scenery lately. She hears a noise and wonders if something is happening again, but nothing is wrong. They have arrived in Ils. Meanwhile, the civil war in Imphanon ends with the royalists winning. According to Darren, the young Republican leader has gone into hiding. Because of the war's outcome, Eleanor and the Schuberg merchant suffer a heavy loss. Darren asks Eleanor what they are going to do, and Eleanor calmly tells him to give it some time. Eleanor has the power to reroute the course of the war, but he is still holding back. He says it is not yet time for them to step in. Because of Eleanor's cryptic actions, several branches take issue with the recent changes and leave the faction, the same way Eleanor once left his father. It may look like independence, but to the Merchant Guild it is betrayal and division. There is also the sudden rise of the Manuel merchants, created by Juan Manuel, once one of Eleanor's closest aides. Darren tells Eleanor that the king has secretly called Juan Manuel. The king of Kissen has always liked placing limits on the Schuberg merchants. Darren tries to find out what the king and Juan Manuel discussed, but cannot since Juan was once on their side. Eleanor is not bothered. He already knows the king will offer Juan his support to keep the Schuberg trade union in check, which will make business harder for a while. Eleanor says things will get worse than before. When Darren asks what they should do, Eleanor says nothing. He wants them to think he is unsure of what to do, and he plans to place an even heavier debt over Imphanon. He adds that the Republican Party will likely start rebuilding, and nothing is over yet. He also says he might enter the domestic garment business and tells Darren to find him a location that is not accessible to outsiders but still close to the capital. After Darren leaves, Eleanor thinks he has no interest in judging what is right or wrong politically. From his window, he sees a girl with red hair and quickly moves to look again, but it is not Irina. Back in Ils, Irina tries to carry a heavy drum and stops to rest. A young crewman comments that he told her to rest, while others praise her competitive spirit. Even though it is hot, Irina feels clear-headed and refreshed. She shouts about how much she loves Ils, and Nick reminds her they arrived only an hour ago. She points at some passing women and starts gushing about how beautiful they are, even telling them they are pretty. She wonders whether Ils has been influenced by different cultures, since many luxury goods from the east bound for Imphanon and Kissen pass through there. She grabs Nick's hands while jumping in excitement, making him blush. One crew member shouts that she should stop playing with Nick's heart, and another asks what her plans are now that she is in Ils. She says work, and that it is time for her to start making money. A year later, an Ils girl, Katie, bursts into Irina's room calling her my lady. She tells Irina she is late and that most of their top clients have already arrived. Irina thanks the maids who helped her get dressed and leaves with Katie. At the party downstairs, the ladies cannot stop admiring Irina. They admire the earrings she is wearing and make a mental note to ask if she sells them. Someone mentions that Irina is a foreigner, which surprises a few of them because she speaks Ilian fluently, owns 7 shops, and is a member of Cerilius. Meanwhile, Nick watches a drama performance and says the place feels like the noble salons they used to have during the caste system. The Archduke replies that that is probably the goal, and that even though the caste system is gone, people's sense of privilege and vanity is still the same. The Archduke remembers the day Irina asked to join the Cerilius Merchant Guild. She promised not to disappoint him. He asked how she could be so sure. She said she was more capable than he thinks, that she speaks Ilian, Ifanese, and the language of Kissen. She knows life on a cruise ship and is willing to learn whatever she needs, and most of all, she is good at sales. Nick says Irina is truly amazing, recalling the day she opened her street store. She ran to him holding a banner that read, "The Shop of Mysterious Goods by Irina of Kissen." She even talked about making herself a mannequin. He also remembers how he practically had to carry her out of the store so she would rest, and now she has built success far from home. After the party, Irina goes to her room alone. As she brushes her hair, she remembers the time Eleanor brushed her hair and told her where he learned it. He said he grew up around brothels and used to do the ladies' hair for money. He learned by watching them. He told her he was not sure he should tell her because he did not think she would like it once she knew where it came from, since she is a noble. At the same time, Eleanor looks at a hairbrush and thinks back to when he was brushing Irina's hair, and she asked if he knew what a mental breakdown felt like. He thinks that he does. As a child, he often suffered from overwhelming emotions so intense that he learned to act like they did not matter. That was when Irina gave him the handkerchief. He thinks she set his life ablaze. A few days later, Nick visits Irina at her store. She is surprised to see him since they have not met in a while. He asks about business, complains that she has gotten thinner, and then tells her the Archduke wants to see her. She asks if everything is okay, and he says the Archduke is just lonely. She tells Nick to let the Archduke know she would love to see him and will come as soon as she finishes things at the shop. Nick suggests they go together. Later at the Archduke's place, a young boy who works there sees the Archduke and Irina and tells the Archduke's aide that he has not seen her in a while, even though her shop is right next door. He also says the Archduke only looks forward to his conversations with Irina. The aide shouts at the boy to keep quiet, then remarks that there is a resemblance between Irina and the Archduke. He says that, as a young man, the Archduke had a fiery temper, just like Irina. Meanwhile, Irina and the Archduke talk about her Ilian teacher, who not only taught Ilianite literature but was also a writer. The Archduke asks if she will not open more shops in other busy cities in Ils. Irina's business is doing well, and she now has many people working under her. She tells him she wants to return to Kisen soon and is happy with how things are now. The Archduke, disappointed, asks her to settle in Ils instead, saying it is a place that will always treat her well. She tells him there is someone she owes a great deal to back in Kisen. That person tried to control her. She lost sleep from frustration and from thinking about how to repay him. In truth, she felt deeply humiliated, but he was also the only one who believed she could become something. When she had nothing, he told her time was valuable, and in the end, he helped her without asking for anything in return. She remembers the day he asked her to stay with him of her own will, and the day she left. Then she tells the Archduke that she must repay Eleanor, even if he does not want her to. The Archduke offers to send someone from his guild to Kisen with the money Irina wants to give Eleanor. Irina tells him that Eleanor is waiting for her, not her money, which is why she must go in person. The Archduke asks if she also wants to see the man she is talking about, and whether Kisen will recognize her strength and let her grow the way Ils did. At Kisen, Eleanor stands at the dock, staring at the ocean like he has been doing more often lately. The workers nearby whisper among themselves about him, clearly uneasy with his presence. Eleanor asks Darren how the meeting with the coal mine owner went. Darren confidently says it went well, and asks who in the coal industry would refuse having production costs cut in half when the work gets dirty anyway. Darren cannot help but admire Eleanor. Trade in Imphanon has slowed, and with new competitors appearing, Eleanor should be worried. Instead, he changed direction without hesitation and closed all the deals. Eleanor announces that his next target is the Kisen royal family. He plans to use his sewing machines to produce military uniforms. He asks Darren to request an audience with the king. Darren asks if he is sure, since the king seems to favor the Manuel merchants. Eleanor just scoffs and says the king is not loyal. He is confident the king will work with him again. Then Darren asks if he is still waiting for Irina, mentioning that Eleanor has searched all of Imphanon. Eleanor tells him Irina is not in Imphanon. She was never there. The next day in Ils, Irina puts up posters everywhere looking for sailors, but no one applies because the ship is led by a woman. However, one of the sailors who once worked on the Archduke's ship sees the poster. Meanwhile, Irina complains to Katie that no one has applied. As she vents, the sailors from the Archduke's ship arrive, willing to apply. One of them says this will be his last voyage. They then ask if she will make it worth their while. She jumps up and says she is rich enough to pay them as much as the Archduke did. One of the sick men tells her they will take her home safely, the same way she helped bring them home in one piece. This brings tears to her eyes. Everything she did on the ship was out of duty, and she never expected anything in return. Back in Kisen, Eleanor stands at his usual spot by the sea when Darren asks whether he should send a ship, since Eleanor knows where Irina is. Eleanor simply says Irina will return, which makes Darren wonder how he can be so sure. He says Irina promised they would meet again, and he knows she will keep that promise and come back to him. In Ils, Irina places a holy word on her ship as she prepares to depart. She thinks she now understands what it means to be a merchant, built on contracts, rights, and duties. A truth that guided Eilenor's life, and one he broke for her sake. She thinks of him as a lonely island no one sails to, but now she has decided she will not leave him alone in this cold world. Nick joins Irina on her journey to Kisen while the Archduke and his aide are there to say goodbye. A few months later, Darren interrupts Eleanor's meeting and informs him that 3 large Cerealia ships have just arrived from Ils. There are opportunities merchants never miss, and one of them is a merchant ship from Ils, not for Alienite goods, but because they carry Eastern goods that pass through them. Eleanor tells Darren to make contact and arrange a meeting. Darren replies that customs already gave the information to Manuel's merchants. At the dock, Juan Manuel introduces himself to Irina. When she introduces herself, he tells her he already knows who she is, and explains that he used to be part of the Schuberg merchants. He tries to make a deal with her, but she politely tells him the goods she is carrying belong to Eleanor. Juan Manuel, knowing she owes Eleanor, offers to pay her debt if she gives him all the goods, but Irina refuses and says she hopes they meet again. She quietly notes that Eleanor still has enemies. After Juan Manuel leaves, someone from the Schuberg trade union arrives and invites Irina to the headquarters. Later, Irina and her team wait in a room there, and Irina wears a cloak that hides her face, confusing her crew. Eleanor enters and looks at her, saying nothing. When he sits down, Nick starts the meeting by asking if anyone can speak Ilian since he cannot speak Ifanese. Eleanor responds by asking Irina if she has forgotten her native language. She is surprised that he recognized her. She removes her cloak, and Darren gasps in shock. Irina and Eleanor stare at each other for a long moment. She starts to feel embarrassed and thinks he is not happy to see her. She quickly shifts to business, sliding him documents listing the goods they bought. Darren looks at them in shock because it is far more than what they usually trade. Irina says she wrote a tentative price, but he can adjust it as he likes, even lower it. It does not matter to her. Eleanor looks at it and signs without saying a word. Afterward, Irina tells Eleanor, who still has not spoken, that she said she would pay off her debt. She knows he does not need the money, but she still wants to repay him. When he remains silent, she turns to leave, but he stops her at the door, pulling her into a hug from behind. He tells her he will not do anything bad and asks her to stay with him for a moment. Then, Eleanor takes Irina to his house, and his servants are clearly excited to see her. As she walks through the house, he follows behind her like a puppy. Later that evening, he tugs her cloak as she is about to leave and asks where she is going. She tells him she wants to help her crew find decent accommodation because she does not want them to get overcharged. She explains that her responsibility to the crew ended when they docked, and how they spend their money is not her business. Helping them would only make them look down on her. But from Eleanor's observation, they strangely cling to her as if they are worried about her safety. Eleanor looks at the men, then asks Irina where she will be sleeping, and invites her to stay at the manor. She says she needs to look out for her family on their first night. The word surprises Eleanor's servants, and they say Irina used to be part of their family. Irina keeps talking about sailors and their drinking and drug problems while Eleanor stares at Nick, making him flinch. Nick tries to move closer to Irina. Immediately, Eleanor tells Irina not to be surprised and kisses her before she can react. When the kiss ends, he apologizes for doing it so suddenly, then tells her he will visit her the next day. The next morning, Irina wakes up to Eleanor staring at her, which shocks her. Eleanor explains that waiting was unbearable, so he let himself in and he apologizes. She laughs, and he tells her that things like this can happen easily, so she should not stay at an inn. He also says a door lock is not enough to protect her. He asks if he is allowed to lie next to her, unsure if she wants to start over or live without him in her life. She opens the covers, inviting him in. When he lies down, he just stares at her until she covers her face in embarrassment. He tells her not to hide her face since it has been 2 years since he last saw her, even though she has seen herself in the mirror. She says she looks older and that the ocean wind was harsh on her skin. He tells her that time will never fade her beauty. Nothing in this world could ever make her fade. He is afraid she might run away again because she is a free spirit that cannot be chained down. That is why he should keep his distance and show her some respect. But unable to control himself, he nuzzles her neck. After that, he takes her to his house for breakfast. The servants address Irina very formally, and she reminds them that she used to work with them. At breakfast, Irina talks about how much she misses Eleanor's chef, who always seems eager to feed her. She tells Eleanor stories as they eat, and he quietly listens. When he notices she is eating vegetables, he points out that her tastes have changed. She tells him she now understands what he said about eating for survival. He thinks she has developed new thoughts, habits, and skills. He deeply regrets not being there during that time. Then he says he will try to eat other foods too. Meanwhile, the servants are happy that there is finally peace in the manor. Suddenly, Eleanor asks Irina if she is dating anyone, and Irina almost chokes. She manages to say no, and he follows up by asking if anyone has warmed her bed at night. Even the servants cannot believe he is asking such things. After breakfast, they take a walk around the manor. After a while, Eleanor asks Irina if she is done looking around. She starts talking about how nothing has changed, but he impatiently pulls her inside his bedroom. There, he lists everything he missed about her and asks if they can do it. He asks her again if she had anyone keep her company, and when she says no, he asks about Nick. She tells him she is starting to get offended by his questions and asks if he was with another woman. He tells her there was no one else, but his situation was different from hers. After that, they spend the whole morning in bed. Later, Eleanor brings sugar water, takes a sip, then feeds it to Irina mouth by mouth until they finish the entire glass. He then apologizes for not considering that she had just returned from a long journey. She sleepily says she likes what they did. The way she speaks makes him ask if she has any health issues, and she assures him she is naturally healthy and strong. Then she blames her exhaustion on the stress from sailing. She also admits she hated Kisan and still holds some resentment. However, Kisan is where she was born and raised, so she feels more comfortable there, but she would not have returned if not for him. Then she falls asleep, mumbling about sailing. Eleanor watches her, thinking he cannot force her to stay because she no longer belongs to him. Still, he wonders if he is allowed to say he does not want her to leave. 4 days later, Eleanor invites Irina to come check the factory with him, though he thinks she may not be strong enough yet. Once again, she assures him she is healthy. On their way to the factory, Irina comments that Kisan has not changed, while Eleanor thinks that soon everything will change in an instant, like a bursting dam. She expresses excitement about seeing his factory, and says she knew he would have already started something, since he has a talent for making money. She also asks what he has been interested in lately. He replies that he is working with steam engines used in mines and weaving looms. He has been thinking about applying them to ships to increase speed. Expanding his business requires speed, and because of the crisis in Imphanon, whoever secures the scarce textiles first will dominate the growing domestic market. Eleanor shows Irina around the factory, which impresses her greatly. Then she asks him if he would like to be her business partner. The next scene shows Irina in the manor holding a meeting with her crew about sailing back to Ils. This is when she realizes Eleanor thinks she is returning to Ils. She tells him she is actually planning to stay in Kizan for now. Then she tells the crew they will leave in 5 days, if the weather allows. Nick asks if she will be staying at the manor, and she turns to Eleanor, asking whether she should buy back the Marquis estate, her childhood home. This surprises Hans, who knows a property like that would cost a fortune. Darren suddenly appears, scaring Hans, and tells him that Irina is now rich, which shocks Hans even more. The servants cannot help but admire Irina and are also surprised that she left all her achievements in Ils just to return to Kisen. After the sailors leave, Irina and Eleanor take a walk around the manor. She asks why he just stood there during the meeting, and he says they were not his guests. She snaps back that it is his house. He changes the topic and asks about her return to Ils. She tells him she will be staying, and that is the reason she came back. He says he will check whether the new owner of her childhood home is willing to sell and try to get a good deal for her. He asks if she is uncomfortable in his home, and she says that if she is going to live in Kisen, she needs her own place. Then he begs her to stay with him even if she gets the Marquis estate back. He knows now, after losing her once, that begging is more effective than pride. 5 days later, Irina checks the ship that will take her crew back home, while Eleanor watches her with a worried expression. Some of the crew notice this and comment on how strange it is that he worries about Irina, who is known for punching, biting, and kicking men where it hurts and has strong survival instincts. They assume Eleanor cannot understand them, but he does, and he dislikes how they talk about her. Irina gives one of the crew members an envelope for the Archduke and tells him that the Archduke has the rest of their wages, which is a lie. Their wages have already been paid. She stretches out her hand to one of the crew members, thinking she should say goodbye like a sailor, thanking them for bringing her home safely, and he takes her hand. She waves at the ship as it leaves and prays for them. After praying, Eleanor tells her to avoid getting close to sailors again. He says her duty ends when she pays them and warns that she can be taken advantage of. She tells him that sailors are not like wooden oars to be discarded. They risk their lives at sea, so he should not speak of them so harshly. She wonders why he is so cold and why the world he sees feels so dark. Later, Irina asks Nick, who did not board the ship, what he was thinking. After a bit of lighthearted arguing, Nick tells her that the Archduke asked him to stay in Kisen with her for a while so he can learn from her. Irina thinks the Archduke must have noticed Nick's good qualities and cares about him more than the other sailors, so he probably wants Nick to gain experience and eventually help manage the guild. Nick asks Irina why Eleanor is just standing there. He assumes Eleanor cannot understand Eileen, but Irina knows better. She knows he understands everything and is just pretending not to, so he does not have to talk to Nick. Irina tells Nick she is opening a shop and that he can work there with her. After Nick leaves, Eleanor comments that Irina and Nick seem close. She then asks him why he pretends not to speak to Ilian when he actually speaks to her better than her. He says he is not better than her, but she argues that he had higher grades at the academy. He replies that that is not how a language is meant to be learned, and that the way she learned it is the right way. He then brings the conversation back to Nick, asking if she is sure Nick has no feelings for her. She explains that it is not like that, and that they only became close after going through a few near-death experiences together. Eleanor thinks Nick was by her side when he wasn't. The following day, Irina and Eleanor sit under a tree reading when he suddenly brings up work and asks about the storage of the crops she brought with her. This leads her to ask whether he plans to sell only work uniforms and military clothing. That turns into a longer discussion about how people dislike ready-made clothes, and Irina suggests they should remove the reasons people hate them in the first place. Days later, Irina opens her new store with Nick and Susan as employees, and she names it Irina. Days later, while Eleanor and Irina are in a restaurant, he mentions that she has been wearing revealing dresses lately. She teasingly asks if it bothers him. Irina does not really like revealing clothes, but she has been wearing them often to test their potential in Kisen. She also does not want to copy already trending styles because she will be too late to the market, so she plans to start the trend herself, which Eleanor admires. A few days later, Irina lies down in her store, while Nick, who has been learning the Kisen language, struggles to read an article about Irina's recent failures. She tells Eleanor that she does not think she is cut out to be a trendsetter, and he tells her she is so beautiful that people cannot even imagine copying her, which makes her blush. A few days later, Irina makes Eleanor try on different colored shirts, while Hans and Daisy whisper about how cute he looks with her. They say they are glad he finally seems to be able to breathe again. Irina compliments him, saying he looks good in all the colors, which embarrasses him. When he changes back into his usual black outfit, she asks why he always wears dark clothes and never accessorizes. He says it is because he does not want people to know how he feels. For example, she wears bright colors when she is happy, so he does not want people to assume his mood from his clothes. Irina remembers the scars on his back and the bruises he used to have when they were at the academy. He apologizes for making her uncomfortable, but she says he is not. Then he asks if he can braid her hair. As he does, she wonders aloud what they can do to get people interested in their clothes. She suddenly asks Eleanor if he would go to a show with her and if he knows any popular opera houses or theaters. Eleanor, who has no interest in the arts, says he will find out. So for the next few days, Irina and Eleanor attend operas and theaters, and Irina shows up in a new dress every time. However, she finds the theater and opera boring. Eleanor agrees that it is boring, saying he would rather watch her do a one-person play than spend money on this garbage. Irina is not sure whether that is a compliment. The next day, Eleanor shows Irina the machine he bought for the ship. She says it is amazing, but she does not really understand machines. Before they leave, Irina thanks the inventor, which makes the man blush. Then they go to see a play Susan told Irina about. The play has become very popular among commoners and young women. It is called The Ordinary Life of Sandra Mayer. At the theater, Irina and Eleanor sit among the crowd instead of in a private box. Irina chose the seats to observe the audience's reactions and the actors' expressions. Sitting there, she suddenly realizes she did not consider how Eleanor might feel. She suggests they move, but he says he is fine as long as she is. They talk about how the play is set in Infanon, and since she paid for the tickets, she tells him to let her know if he feels uncomfortable in any way. As the play begins, Irina becomes completely absorbed. The story about Sandra Mayer and ordinary lives feels so real to her that she starts comparing it to reality. When the play ends, she sits in deep thought, not realizing they are the only ones left in the theater. Eleanor snaps her out of it, then suddenly becomes more seductive. After they get home and freshen up, Irina asks Eleanor about the play. He says he thinks it has a more radical message than expected, and even a slightly dangerous one. Irina agrees and starts talking about the injustice in the story and the caste system, which makes Eleanor say the writer seems to share the Republicans' ideals. She then asks if he is sure he can handle the textile company, especially after seeing what happened in Infanon. She tells him there will be forces working against him, and the danger will be on a completely different level compared to when he was building the guild. He says that only makes him want to invent the steam engine sooner. He cannot let Infanon outpace him with steam technology, as it did with textiles. He also admits he already knew the Republicans would not win the Civil War, because it is not easy to beat an enemy with greater electrical power. He did not make a deal with them because he could not argue against her point that it was simply the result of the times. He tells her he understands her concern, but they cannot be the only ones refusing to move with the current. The next day, Irina keeps thinking about what Eleanor said while sketching designs for ready-made clothing. She starts wondering if she has been moving in the wrong direction. Looking at her sketches, she thinks about past and current trends in Kisan. She notices that it is now common for women to wear riding pants in public. She realizes this is because more women have joined the workforce. That means her designs must be simple, functional, and comfortable. She has always believed she could rely on her own aesthetic sense, but now she realizes this is not the time to rely on taste alone. She thinks she and Eleanor should do their best to ride the wave rather than fight it. After realizing her mistakes, Irina spends the next few days working on new designs. Late one night while she is working, she notices movement outside her store and thinks it is a burglar. She grabs a weapon and heads to the door, only to find Hans waiting there. He tells her he came to escort her home since she is running late. The following day, Irina and Eleanor stand on the street holding flowers. She tells him what happened the night before and promises she will come home early from now on, so he does not need to send the butler again. He says Hans volunteered and begins to say it is because Hans likes her, but she cuts him off. She tells him that he is the only one who has ever liked her for her personality. She quickly corrects herself, flustered, adding that he actually loves her. The people she was waiting for then come out, and she pulls Eleanor toward them. She introduces herself and Eleanor to the actors from The Ordinary Life of Sandra Mayer. She gives them the flowers, which they happily accept. After that, she sits with them for a drink and proposes sponsoring their performances, on the condition that they wear clothes exclusively from her boutique during shows. A few nights later, Irina returns home drunk after celebrating strong sales that day. Eleanor carries her to bed, but as soon as he puts her down, she gets back up and lies on his lap, which flusters him. He moves her onto the bed and kisses her. The next day, Juan Manuel comes to the store and tries to convince Irina to leave the Schuberg merchants and work with him, expanding her business to Infanon. He tells her that Count Schuberg made a grave mistake by failing to support the royal faction during the Civil War, and asks whether she plans to limit herself to Kisan. He also offers her far better conditions. Irina refuses, saying she wants to maintain the trust of those she works with. After Juan Manuel leaves, Nick asks what he wanted, and she says it was nothing. She remembers Juan Manuel telling her he wanted to see her when she was alone, but lately she has been going home early. Still, she thinks he will come again another time. Later, Irina goes to the factory and sees people running around in panic. She finds Hans, who tells her the factory is on fire and that Eleanor will not be able to go home with her. That night, Irina asks Eleanor if the textile factory is okay. She says she does not want to pressure him, but she is running out of textiles. He assures her they will be running again by the end of the month. When she asks who caused it, he says it must have been one of the seamstresses. Irina wonders if it really was a seamstress. Eleanor tells her she should be more careful as well. He adds that she should not go around biting people because she might get hurt, and that it only works on dimwit Martin. She agrees and says it is better to just kick them in the groin. She immediately regrets saying it. He asks her what really happened in Ills. She tries to say she just made money, but he does not believe her. So she tells him the person she kicked deserved it, but it was not because of her. He sighs and then hugs her. She jokes about being a tomboy, which makes him a bit angry. She quickly changes the topic and asks him to teach her self-defense. He knows she is avoiding the subject, but agrees anyway. The next day, training begins. Eleanor starts with a lecture, which she listens to seriously. The servants think he should just hire people to protect Irina instead. When training begins, she is very bad at it. Eleanor praises her for still remembering the basic principles and says that in real fights, endurance is what matters most when using a sword. She asks what she should do, and he decides to train her with a dagger instead, since she will likely not carry a sword when she meets her guest. Quote, he sets up a target, but she misses every throw. She blames the wind, but when Eleanor throws the dagger, he hits the bullseye every time, which amazes her. She tries again and still misses. Eleanor says it is because she is too hasty. He continues explaining, then points a dagger at a rabbit, saying that an opponent will not stay still. She screams and jumps on him, shouting that he should not kill her rabbit. When they fall to the ground, he asks when the rabbit living on the manor grounds became hers. Then he says that would only happen if they were married. She would own the manor, his wealth, the rabbit, and even him. The following day, Irina works on a dress while angrily muttering to herself about Eleanor's fourth proposal. She finds it cute that he used a rabbit to propose, but she wishes he would just tell her he loves her directly. She also thinks she does not want his money because she already has her own. Someone enters the store, and she immediately becomes cheerful. Later in the day, while Irina is talking to Nick about inventory, she overhears Susan speaking to a customer. She rushes over and tells the customer she does not think the dress Susan is showing her would suit her. She compliments the customer's shoulders and explains why the dress would not work. Then she recommends the dress she was working on earlier. When the customer tries it on, it looks great on her. Irina explains that the style is not popular in Kisen yet, but it is in Ills, and that it is ahead of its time. The customer ends up buying it, and Nick is impressed by Irina's customer service. After that, Irina tells Nick to follow her to the textile factory. On the way, she tells him about her plan to introduce new designs now that her boutique is becoming well known. Nick understands but advises her to give people more time to adjust, which makes her ask if he thinks she is rushing things. He says he just wants her to enjoy her success. When they arrive at the factory, she is shocked to see that a huge fight has broken out. Nick quickly hides them in a corner and Irina looks around, realizing they need to act. She sees 2 Imperial guards facing away and runs to them, asking for help, but they ignore her. She realizes they are ignoring the situation on purpose. She tries again, saying they do not need to fight for them, only help the workers escape. When the guards still refuse, she takes a sword from one of them and joins the fight. Nick apologizes to the guards and says that if Irina gets hurt, he will not be happy. Then he takes a sword and joins in, yelling at her for rushing into danger. Irina focuses on getting the workers to safety, and when she turns back, she is surprised to see Nick fighting with impressive skill. After everything, Irina sits beside an injured Nick in the hospital. She says she can see there was another reason the Archduke cared about him. They joke for a while, then she seriously tells him to go back to Ills once he recovers. She says Kisen is too dangerous and will only get worse, and if he gets seriously hurt, she will not be able to face the Archduke. Nick tells her he came to a foreign country, where he does not even know the language because of her, but she does not change her mind. Suddenly, Eleanor asks Irina to give him a moment alone with Nick. Nick understands what Eleanor says and begs Irina not to leave, but she still does. After she leaves, Nick awkwardly asks Eleanor about medical treatment. That night, while in bed, Irina brings up the guards and then tells Eleanor about Juan Manuel's visit. He asks why she is telling him about it only now, and she says she already rejected him on the spot, so there was nothing more to say. But then a fire broke out at the factory the same day. She tells him she does not think the fire or the factory attack was an accident or something done by ordinary citizens, because the attackers were well trained. Then she tells him about her plan to open her own guild, the Nordiac Merchants. Eleanor tells her it is dangerous. She talks about going to Infanon, and he warns her it will not take long for the Imperial family there to notice their cooperation. He tells her she should at least wait until the steamship is finished. She says her father made deals with the Infanon Imperial family, so they will not be able to impose political pressure on her. After more convincing from Irina, Eleanor reluctantly agrees, saying he regrets tearing up the deeds to her debt. The very next day, Irina establishes her guild. However, it takes time before she can set sail for Infanon. On the day of departure, Nick watches as the guards Eleanor hired to protect Irina line up just as many as the sailors she has hired. He remembers the day Eleanor spoke to him at the hospital, when Eleanor thanked him in Ilian, something that shocked Nick. Irina always told Nick that Eleanor was the most trustworthy person in Kisen. But to Nick, Eleanor always seemed like a dangerous man. When he tells her this, she agrees, but says Eleanor is also the only one who truly believed in her. She adds that Eleanor loves her so much he is trying to change his own personality for her, so how could she not love someone like that? In the present, Nick watches Eleanor and Irina say their goodbyes, thinking that Eleanor would never have even spoken to him if not for that attack. Irina asks Eleanor if she is going to Imphanon for a battle, referring to the large number of armed guards he has hired. He asks if she cannot stay, saying there are many people she could send in her place. He then asks if she will come back to him, and she tells him that as long as he is in Kisen, she will return. If he is not in Kisen, she will find him wherever he is, and she promises she will always come back to him. As the ship sets sail, Irina jumps around excitedly, happy to be at sea again. She and Nick fall into their usual banter about her belonging to multiple guilds, which leads him to call her Guildmaster, making her laugh. By the 6th day of the voyage, they can already see Imphanon. Irina thinks they arrived faster than expected. A few days after she left Kisen, Juan Manuel visited her again. When she confronted him about using illegal force, he did not deny it. He told her that Count Schuberg would agree with him, which made her angry. The Manuel Guild has been threatening both her and Eleanor, feeding off political influence. Now she believes the only way to counter them is to overwhelm them with capital and trade volume by normalizing trade with Imphanon. When they arrived at Imphanon, Irina asked Nick if he could prove that he was a member of Cerilius. When he says he can, she tells him that there are a few places in Imphanon her father used to trade, so she is going to use the Nordiak name to strike some deals. And they can do the remaining deals under the Cerilius name because the imperial family has a precarious relationship with Eleanor. After that, she leaves Nick to attend to the merchants and guilds who want their goods. After several meetings, she arrives at the estate of a man who used to do business with her father. She introduces herself and asks whether he would be interested in purchasing a bulk order of their work uniforms. As she talks to him about the uniforms, the man doesn't say much, but she can see he is interested. After a while, he tells her he will only purchase a third of her suggested volume because he needs to test their marketability. As a good businesswoman, Irina doesn't back down. She tells him that if he pays the full amount, she will grant him exclusive buying rights for 6 months. Then she casually adds that even if he refuses, she knows she can sell them elsewhere before she goes back to Kisen, because the marketability of her products has already been proven there. The man tells her she resembles her father, and she is surprised he remembers her father. As the man is about to sign, he asks for fabrics. As Irina is about to leave, she asks the man where the biggest shopping district is in Imphanon. The man advises against venturing too far into the capital because it isn't safe. Textile workers staged a riot and even set the factory on fire, and managed to reach the palace. The royal family has been controlling the supply of cotton as a way to control merchants. On the way back to Kisen, Irina looks at the ocean, thinking that the people of Imphanon seem to have more animosity towards the royal family than she expected, and that information might be more valuable than her business deals. Nick interrupts her thoughts by bringing up Eleanor. She blushes and asks him if he thinks that Eleanor loves her a lot. He tells her that anyone who can't see that Eleanor loves her is blind. She asks why Eleanor won't tell her how he feels, and Nick asks her if she really needs to hear it. She knows that she can tell Eleanor how she feels first, but she would like to hear him say it. She wants to know whether he arrived at the same conclusion she did. That is what she wants to hear. As they arrive in Kisen, Irina runs to Eleanor, who is waiting at the dock, and hugs him. She asks how he knew she would arrive today, and he asks if she is hurt. She says no and asks if he is hurt too, which surprises him. Then he asks if she will let him check if she is hurt anywhere. That turns into him checking her, and it leads them to bed. While lying in bed, she asks if he missed her. He responds by asking why she would even ask that when the last thing he remembers is her leaving him so coldly despite his pleas. She says she did not, and feels guilty when he says that. He tells her she should feel guilty for abandoning him. Next, they are in a bath together when Irina asks why he always speaks to her so politely. She starts explaining how she entered the academy earlier than others her age, but Eleanor already knows that, as does everyone else in their circle. He even knows she was born in the morning, which surprises her. She says he always addressed her with respect, even when she was working as a maid, but he did not like it when she did the same to him. He asks if she remembers what he told her before, that he never looked down on her. He says he simply wanted to be good to her. He has always wanted to treat her with the respect she deserves, and he hated the world for not seeing her worth. He wanted to give her everything she wanted, and it angered him that he could not. The next day at the store, Irina discovers that her products are being copied. Earlier that day, Eleanor informed Irina that other boutiques were already copying her designs, but she did not care much because her prices were lower. Then he told her that the Manuel merchants were trying to enter the textile business, and once they did, they would catch up quickly and compete on pricing. Presently, Irina looks at the fake designs, wondering if she should start putting her name on her work. She instructs her employees to focus on keeping their current clients and to carefully check for defective products before shipping. Nick suggests she confront the boutiques copying her designs, but Irina does not like the idea. When he asks what she would do instead, she considers using a logo but rejects it, thinking it would look strange. Then she suggests to Susan and Nick that they could stitch a small name tag with her brand and make it as luxurious as possible. She then gets the idea to also add sizing labels, but Susan and Nick are not fully convinced. She insists, however, that the tags will definitely have an effect. Irina knows that other merchant groups building their own textile factories is a threat, but not the worst outcome. If ready-made clothes take over the market, people will eventually have no choice but to wear them. It could even change the perception that such clothes are cheap, which is why she thinks they should focus on producing high-quality garments. Later, when Eleanor returns from work, he is told that not only is Irina home earlier than usual, but she is also resting in her room, which is unusual. He goes to check on her, and she assures him she is fine, but he insists on calling a physician. She blushes and tells him it is just cramps, though more painful than usual. She hides her face in embarrassment but is surprised when Eleanor begins rubbing her stomach to warm it. He says he heard it helps from women in the brothel where he grew up. After sitting like that for a while, Irina brings up the Imphanon textile issues, saying the imperial family directly controls it. They discuss how the situation could affect the royal family, and how Republicans might use it politically. She tells Eleanor he needs to manage his reputation and be careful in how he treats others, since negative sentiment is hard to undo once it spreads. She also suggests delaying the steamship project, believing it could damage sailors' pride. Eleanor understands her concern, but says that if they do not take over the market first, they might lose their chance. She decides that if that is his choice, she will support him just as he supported her. The next day, Irina goes to the cotton farm with a food basket, only to have the door shut in her face. While Irina was away in Imphanon, Eleanor bought some land in the southern region to expand the textile factories. He believed that the farther they moved from the capital and the harbor, the more advantage they would gain. The south was also the only region where cotton grew, though only in small amounts. There were many craftspeople there who traditionally wove fabric, but the invention of the loom and spinning machines had severely reduced their work. As a result, they held strong negative opinions about the textile industry. So when Irina arrived at the cotton farm with gifts, the owner told her to leave and slammed the door in her face. Even though she expected this reaction, she still felt embarrassed. Suddenly, Eleanor grabbed her and shouted at her to stop associating with such rude people, prompting the workers nearby to whisper. They find a quiet place to talk, where Irina explains that she knows the people there will be hostile, but she still wants to break down their resistance and earn their trust so she can eventually offer them jobs. She tells him that, at its core, being a merchant is about winning people over, and asks whether he only plans to sell to people who already like him. She tells him he must convince them he has no ill intentions and that he will offer quality work, fair wages, and good working conditions so people will want to join the textile factories. As they talk, a young boy named Thomas joins them. Irina interacts with him while Eleanor just watches quietly. She notices Thomas staring at the candy in her basket, so she offers it to him and also gives him bread to share with his siblings. After the boy leaves, Irina comments that children like Thomas are very cute. Eleanor immediately suggests they should have children, and she snaps that that is not what she meant. He then praises her for how she treated Thomas. Irina says Thomas deserves more because he gave her an idea. She starts rambling about how her boutique is doing better than expected, but she wants to expand further. Since children grow quickly, it is difficult for parents to keep up with custom-made clothing. That is why she suggests they create a children's clothing line. Days later, Irina pulls Nick into a dark alley and then down into a basement, where she has set up a training dummy like the one Eleanor used when she trained him. She throws a dagger at it, and it sticks cleanly. She asks Nick if she has improved. Then she asks him not to tell Eleanor, though she suspects Eleanor already knows. She asks Nick to teach her how to use a sword, since with daggers, it is over. Once you throw them, you cannot pick them back up. She shows him a lightweight sword she bought in Imphanon and asks what he thinks. He tells her it is more suited for piercing than slashing, while people in Kisan usually use swords for slashing. Unbothered, she says she has other swords. Nick had heard how poorly she performed when training with Eleanor. He tells her she should ask Eleanor to train her instead, but she refuses, saying Nick knows how Eleanor really sees her skill level. She then gives him a speech explaining why he should train her. She knows the swordsmanship she learned at the academy will not match real combat, and that the boys in her class took it easy on her. She promises to try her best, and Nick eventually agrees. That night in bed, Irina tells Eleanor about her plan to renovate and expand the first store she opened on Kisana Street. He asks if it would not be better to buy other locations instead. The general store was her first business, and she even opened one in Ills. She explains that she realized people prefer stores where they can buy everything in one place. But she has not been able to meet all her customers' needs because she only sells her own products. That is why she wants to expand her store so other merchants can also sell their goods inside. That way, customers will not have to go from shop to shop. Of course, she plans to charge merchants a fee, which Eleanor realizes is another strong source of income. They discuss her idea further, including real estate prices in the area. Eleanor supports her, which makes her happy, and they continue talking about renovations and expansion. Months later, Irina visits the store her father used to take her to buy dresses when she was a child, and the owner recognizes her. After some small talk, Irina tells the owner, who has already heard about her success, that she is there because she plans to open a general store and would like to sell his items there. She explains how it will work in detail, but he tells her they are on different paths. Irina knows he mainly sells to commoners, so she tells him that if he sells his clothes alongside hers, it will help expand and diversify their customer base. Back at the store, Susan tells Irina they have received another inquiry for space inside the building. She then asks about the owner of the children's boutique, and Irina says he refused. The following day, Irina and Eleanor sit on a bench at the cotton farm. Irina thinks Eleanor probably hates coming here, but he keeps showing up anyway. She asks about his vessel, and he tells her it is in a coastal region not far from there. He says he did not keep it in the capital because of what she said, and invites her to visit it with him next time he goes, though it is still in the drying process. She agrees. He then asks about the general store, which is almost finished. She tells him how things are going, including that people have started asking about investing in it. She also says that once the store is set up, she plans to leave its management to Susan. This surprises Eleanor, who thought she would run it herself for a while. She explains that Susan is better at business than designing clothes, and the only reason Susan joined the boutique was because of her. When she returns to the store, she finds the guildmaster from Imphanon, her father's former business partner, the same man she sold uniforms to before. He requests more uniforms at a lower price, even if it means reduced quality, because they will wear out quickly due to the nature of the work. He hands her a long list of supplies, far more than before. He explains that the situation in Imphanon has worsened and that the Republicans are now even arming commoners, which will make trade more difficult. Because of this, he wants enough stock to fill 5 ships. Days later, Nick returns to the store after running an errand and is shocked to see it packed with merchants, even though it is nearly closing time. While helping Susan make tea, he asks if this order is really worth all this attention. Susan asks him if he is truly the successor of the largest merchant guild in Ills. She explains that it is extremely rare for Imphanon to come to Kizan just to buy goods. Not only has Irina secured a regular buyer from Imphanon, but she has also negotiated a major deal to fill 5 ships. Even the Schuberg Guild has not achieved something like that. This is exactly why the guildmaster from Imphanon was doubtful earlier. He commented that Irina's shop was smaller than expected and questioned whether she could fulfill the deal. She confidently told him she had partners and could handle it. On top of the uniforms and final preparations for the general store, she still has to supply 5 ships within a few days. Nick says she must be completely overwhelmed. That night, Eleanor meets Irina at the general store, which will be finished once she adds furniture and stocks her products. She gives him a tour, and when she shows him the dressing room, he is shocked by how small it is. Normally, dressing rooms are the most spacious and luxurious part of a boutique because that is where garments are adjusted and chosen. But since Irina sells ready-made clothes that require less fitting work, she made them smaller. Eleanor pulls her into one of the rooms and tries to seduce her, saying she is always too busy and he is never her priority. She argues that she is just trying to support their business, but despite her protests, he succeeds. Days later, Nick notices how exhausted Irina has become. He suggests she go home to rest, but she refuses, saying she has somewhere to be, and drags herself out anyway. She goes to the children's boutique, and as she watches the owner sew a dress by hand, she suggests that a sewing machine would be easier. The owner argues that it would not handle delicate work as well. Irina falls asleep, and the owner gently covers her with a blanket, commenting that she was also cute when she was younger, while remembering her throwing a huge tantrum as a child. The Marquis doted on Irina and often helped her pick out textiles and colors for her dresses. If Irina stubbornly insisted on a color she chose herself, the Marquis would find it endearing and tease her by pretending he did not hear her. She would then burst into tears, insisting on what she wanted. One day, however, she stopped making those fussy demands. When the owner asked her why, she said it was because her father had already imagined her wearing it and chosen it himself. During one of Irina's visits, she asked the owner if he supported the Republicans. He admitted that sales were better when the Republicans were in charge, but said he stood on no side. He then spoke about how merchants only cared about money. A while later, Irina wakes up to find the owner beating a dress. She looks at it and says it is beautiful, like the Milky Way, which the owner deeply appreciates. Then she starts to cry. After all the time she came to the store, she had offered to reduce his rent and even given him 3 months free, but he always refused. Now she realizes that some things cannot be bought with money and come from the heart instead. She tells the owner through her tears that she is sorry she only wanted his clothes to be worn and appreciated by people. In another scene, Irina and Eleanor are in the coastal region. After seeing the steamship, they sit on the grass by the river. Eleanor asks if she is still worried about the children's boutique owner. The owner has somehow agreed to work with Irina. It is good news, but it still weighs on her. They have signed a contract and are setting up a showroom, and he will only accept 5 orders a month. Eleanor tells her that sometimes it feels like she is trying too hard to be a good person. He also says the owner changed his mind because she gave him something he needed. Then he asks her what she thinks after seeing the steamship. She admits she still does not know. He then tells her there are 3 reasons he wanted to invent the steamship. The first is business. The second is that if she ever leaves Kizan again, he wants her to be able to return quickly and he knows she will leave again. He refuses to tell her the 3rd reason. She then suggests they make a bet, where the loser grants the winner a wish. He wins the rock-skipping competition even though it is his first time. She asks what he wants and he requests dinner and a kiss. When she complains that the request is too simple, he changes it. He tells her that in the future, if he ever does something that requires an apology, he wants her to forgive him. He says that after everything he has done to her, he has never properly asked for forgiveness, even though she has forgiven him. She asks if he has wronged her, and he tells her to just say there are some unresolved feelings. By the time they reach the textile factory, it is already dark, so Irina suggests they stay the night. Eleanor looks at Darren, who quickly sends someone to find an inn. The factory will soon begin operations, but resistance from locals has been stronger than expected. Eleanor takes Irina inside and gives her a tour, but what impresses her most is the rest area he built based on her suggestion. Outside, Darren notices something and calmly tells a guard, Nelson, to inform Eleanor that they are under attack. Inside the rest area, Irina and Eleanor continue their conversation, unaware that they are already surrounded by bandits. Suddenly, Eleanor becomes alert. A moment later, they hear movement, and he focuses on the footsteps approaching. Nelson bursts in, shouting that they are under attack, but a bandit appears right behind him. Eleanor quickly throws his sword, stabbing the bandit. After pulling the blade free, he tells Nelson to lock the door. He then breaks the window and checks outside. Nelson jumps out. Eleanor tells Irina that if she rides for an hour, she will reach a place called Lyon, where she will find a Schuberg merchant branch. She must report what happened and request help. She starts to climb out, saying she will return quickly, but he stops her and tells her she must stay until the situation is under control. She insists she does not need protection and can go alone, but before she finishes, he pushes her out of the window, telling her it is not the time to be stubborn. Irina runs through the cotton farm, determined to put distance between herself and the attack before finding a horse. She stops when she thinks she recognizes one of the bandits Eleanor stabbed earlier. A major merchant's schedule is not usually confidential, but this trip was spontaneous. That thought makes her suspect Eleanor has been betrayed. She notices the cotton fields have been set on fire. Remembering Eilenor's instructions, she calculates it will take at least 2 hours for help to arrive, and wonders if he can hold out that long, especially since he cannot know who around him is friend or enemy. She tells Nelson to go without her. She trusts he is not a traitor, because if he were, she would already be in danger. He leaves without her. Irina goes to the cotton farmer who had slammed the door in her face when she first arrived, only to discover he is little Tommy's father. She asks him for help, unsure if she is doing the right thing. These people are neither merchants nor soldiers, and she wonders if she can truly ask them to fight alongside her when there is no loyalty binding them. The man tells her it has nothing to do with him and tries to shut the door, but she stops him, begging for help. He still pushes her away, asking why he should risk his life. She explains that she is not asking him to fight, she is only asking him to help put out the fire, but he still refuses. Even Tommy asks his father why he will not help, yet the man does not change his mind. Irina tries asking others nearby for help, but they all ignore her. In her desperation, she twists her ankle and falls. She shouts for help, but no one comes. There is a saying in Kisen, do not trust those you do not know. She gets back up and at that moment feels a sharp pain in her lower abdomen, but she ignores it. She thinks about how Eleanor has always been alone. She knows he has not always been a good person and that his success has not been clean, but still, this situation is not fair. Back at the factory, Eleanor is effectively trapped inside. Fire surrounds the building and bandits are everywhere, so even if he escapes them, he cannot pass the flames. Jumping out the window would also expose his back to attack. Just then, Irina jumps through the window. A dagger flies toward her immediately, but Eleanor knocks it away. He shouts at her to leave, but she refuses. Instead, she picks up a sword and says they should die together. She knows staying will not improve the situation, but she wants to live and die with Eleanor. After fighting for a while, Irina notices the room growing hotter, meaning the fire outside has spread. She is also bleeding heavily, making it difficult to hold her sword properly. They have defeated many of the bandits, but there are still too many to break through the door and escape the flames. She looks for Eleanor and sees he is in a dangerous position. She rushes to him as he coughs blood, while one of his men blocks the bandits Eleanor had been fighting. Irina pulls Eleanor into a corner. He touches her face and asks why she is crying. He reminds her that this is why he told her to leave and asks why she never listens. She lies against him, repeating that she said she would find her way back to him wherever he is and would never abandon him. She refuses to let him die alone. Eleanor wishes she had escaped when she had the chance. He thinks she has not changed despite everything she has suffered, and that is exactly why he both loves and hates her. He manages to sit up, worsening his injuries, but he does not care. He holds Irina and says he will die first. Then he apologizes for not handling things better, for doing things he knew would hurt her, for making her suffer now, and, above all, for loving her. He reminds her of their bet and, in his mind, continues to ask for her forgiveness. Irina cries uncontrollably, thinking she must tell him he has nothing to apologize for, but before she can, the bandits find them. She closes her eyes, preparing for what is coming, but when she opens them again, she sees Darren checking on Eleanor and the bandits being taken down. She assumes reinforcements from Lyon have arrived, but it is not them, it is the villagers, including Tommy's father. Seeing them makes her cry even more. She bows deeply, thanking them for helping. Then she takes Eleanor's hand and tells him they made it. A few weeks later, a very cheerful Irina buys flowers. When she arrives at the manor, Hans tells her that Eleanor has not been in a good mood lately. When he notices the flowers, he asks if they are for Eleanor. She says yes, and that she bought them because she thought they might cheer him up. Hans immediately hurries off to get a vase. A few minutes later, Irina enters Eleanor's room with the flowers already arranged. She sends the maids out. She puts a flower in her mouth and makes a joke, which makes him laugh. Then he asks about her meeting with the emperor. She explains that she asked the emperor to ensure they receive a fair verdict. They have formally filed a case against the Manuel merchant using the strong evidence they gathered, but expecting the judiciary to be fully independent under the emperor is unrealistic. Without the emperor's cooperation, the case will likely be dismissed, and if that happens, their only option will be armed conflict. Eleanor says he will arrange a meeting with the emperor. Irina then takes a wet towel and starts wiping him down, saying he is in a bad mood because he has not properly cleaned himself since being injured. She teases him, and he takes the towel from her, saying he cannot let her keep doing it. She replies that she likes it because it makes her feel like they are husband and wife. He notices she seems to want to say something and prompts her. She asks if he loves her and if he still feels guilt toward her. She tells him he was absolved of everything the moment he tore up the debt papers, and she does not want his love to be burdened by guilt. Eleanor asks about her feelings. She tells him that when she was in Ills, desperately trying to find her place, she thought of him constantly. She gives him a brooch she bought there, saying she wanted something that shines to belong to him. Then she tells him she loves him more than he could ever imagine. They kiss, and for the first time, they can openly speak of their love for each other. News spreads that the Republicans have won the Second Infanon Revolution, and the monarchy has finally ended. Small and big uprisings continue in other countries, and the caste system is still being debated without a clear answer, but Kisan is doing its own thing. Law professors argue that the imperial family should keep their traditions, but the laws should be rewritten so they apply to everyone, even the imperial family. At the store, Irina talks with Nick about him going back to Ills. He says he will return once she is settled. She tells him to wait a bit because no commercial ships are heading to Ills right now. Nick says he can just go back as a sailor, so she tells him to wait for Eleanor's steamship to be ready and hints that she will also return to Ills. She plans to go there to sell her properties and also fulfill a promise she made to the Archduke. She tells Nick that she knows the Archduke isn't an easy man, but Nick should take the chance to rise as high as he can. Then she says they should meet again at the top someday. Nick then asks if Eleanor gave her permission to go back to Ills. She tells him she doesn't need Eleanor's permission, then says she told him anyway because they are lovers and he told her to have a safe trip. Plus, he is the one providing the ship. A few days later, Irina and Eleanor are on the steamship doing a test run, and Irina is amazed at how fast it is. The test run is going well, which makes Eleanor happy. Irina hears that Juan Manuel was arrested the night before, and the Manuel merchant is basically disappearing. She asks Eleanor if the letter from the Infanon Republican government was used like a weapon in his meeting with the emperor the day before. Eleanor admits he originally planned to use the letter to ask for lower tariffs, but changed his mind and decided to negotiate a non-aggression treaty with Kisan instead. He thinks that once the Infanon Republican faction fully changes the system, the royals will definitely try to go to war. This surprises Irina. They talk more, and Eleanor says that if Infanon breaks its promise, the emperor will work with him to use steamships for military purposes. That is the third reason he invented the steamship. Irina doesn't like that. He tells her there will be a time when steamships will rule the world. Irina reflects on how much the world has changed and wonders whether the next generation will be civilized or still act like savages. 2 months and 10 days later, Darren tells Eleanor that a ship is approaching. He goes to the dock and hears Irina's voice from the ship, excitedly waving. When it docks, she runs straight into Eleanor's arms. Then she whispers what the doctor in Ills told her, shocking him. Then she says they will have to settle in Kizen for good. Irina is excited about her new beginning and wonders if it really is one. Eleanor, however, does not seem to share her excitement. Suddenly, he drops to his knees and tells her he will take care of everything. House Schuberg will do whatever it takes to raise the child. She waits for him to say something else, but he doesn't. A few days later, Irina invites Darren to her store for a cookie party. She starts by saying it is hard to figure out what Eleanor is thinking. When she mentions to Darren that he is practically Eleanor's father, Darren immediately says he isn't, and points out that he isn't even married. Irina replies that she is single too. Then she starts bombarding poor Darren with questions like whether now is the right time for Eleanor to propose, whether Eleanor even plans to marry, and why Eleanor is trying to take care of their baby alone when they made it together. Darren tells her he is sure that when Eleanor said he would take care of the child, he meant he was going to marry her. Then he reminds her that Eleanor has proposed 3 times. She argues that it is not the same as proposing to her now. She says Eleanor has been more at ease and relaxed lately, and Darren says it is because of her. Still, she is not satisfied. She says she can't rest like this, so she will have to ask Eleanor tonight. Darren thinks she has nothing to worry about. Then she suddenly says she will propose to Eleanor, as if it were a brand new idea. At that moment, one of her employees arrives with the list of jewelry stores Irina requested earlier. She immediately leaves to buy a ring. Later that night, Irina turns the whole house upside down when she announces she will spend the night out. In the morning, Eleanor wakes Irina up. She is sleeping on a swinging chair in her childhood home, where she stayed the night. It is also his first time seeing her room, and the way it is arranged makes him understand why she once called his manner dull. He asks if she is not scared of sleeping alone in an empty house. She tells him she should be more scared of him, since he can pick locks so easily. She says she wasn't scared anyway because she knows he has people around watching. He says he waited for her all night, but she didn't come. That she abandoned him again, she immediately tells him he is being too much. Then she starts talking about how the last time she was in Ills, her house was almost falling apart because she forgot to leave someone to manage it. She forgot because she rushed back to Kisen so fast to see him again. She says a house doesn't break because people are inside it, it breaks because no one uses it. Eleanor realizes she had been worried that her childhood home would fall into ruin if no one took care of it, and tells her he has already been sending people to maintain it. She pauses for a moment, then finally asks him whether he plans to raise the baby without marriage, saying she wants a stable environment for the child. Eleanor hugs her and apologizes for not making things clear, because in his mind, he already proposed that day at the harbor. He tells her he wants to marry her. He even reminds her how many times he has proposed and how she once slapped him during one of them. He tells her that as a child, he saw many men abandon their children and how badly the women and children suffered because of it. That is why he said what he said at the harbor. Then he kneels before her and starts proposing again, saying that if she rejects him this time, he will survive it, because he is patient. He brings up the rabbit again, his money, and even letting her redecorate the manor however she wants, as long as she marries him. She tells him she doesn't need his money. He asks what she needs since she has already taken his life anyway, and the only thing left is his wealth. Then Irina kneels too and proposes with a ring she designed with him in mind. She asks if he got her a ring, and he shakes his head. She slips the ring onto his finger and thinks she will never forget this moment for the rest of her life. Days later, Eleanor goes to the study where Irina has been writing letters and tries to get her to stop writing, but Irina complains that she's bored with nothing to do. Eleanor proves she is lying by pushing aside the envelopes on her desk to reveal the work document she hid beneath them. She sneezes, and Eleanor becomes so serious as he asks her if she caught a cold. She tells him that her nose was just itchy. He pulls out a handkerchief and wipes her nose. She starts to complain, but stops when she sees that it is still the handkerchief she gave him when they were in the academy. She tells him to get a new handkerchief. He tries to get it back, but she refuses to let him have it, complaining that he has been using that handkerchief for so long. After a few back and forths, he takes the handkerchief from her, saying it is more precious to him than the guild. Then he puts a document on the table and tells her to read and sign. She sees that it is a marriage certificate and signs without reading it, which Eleanor complains about. This is the third contract they have signed together, but this is the only one that does not contain either the contractor or the contractee. She tells him that he would never sign a losing contract, and if it contained anything that would be a disadvantage to her, he wouldn't even give it the time of day. She notices that there is a place provided for the emperor to stamp, and she says she doesn't need the emperor's approval. Eleanor says the emperor insisted, and she should let the emperor do what he wants because he probably has nothing to do. She asks him if he speaks like that in front of the emperor. When he says he doesn't see a reason not to, she scolds him. Eleanor's steamships spread all over the world. In the end, Eleanor becomes the empire's main provider. She tells him that she used to think he didn't like children as he cradles her belly. He tells her that he will work hard and prove to be a better father than she expected, so she shouldn't worry and live the life that she has built. She can't believe that once he told her to be miserable by his side, now he wants her to be happy with him. He tells her that he is going to be the only man in her life, and he wants her to love only him, just like she does now. Months later, during the winter, Irina and Eleanor remarried. Currently, Irina is in shock. She is in shock at how much her son looks like Eleanor. She complains to Eleanor that their son is the spitting image of him and asks why her genes aren't working harder. While she is still complaining, baby Damien opens his eyes, and Eleanor calmly points out that he has her eyes. Eleanor says she sounds disappointed that Damien looks like him. She replies that she just feels defeated. Then she quickly adds that she is joking and that he looks like Eleanor anyway. Eleanor then says he would prefer it if Damien had her personality instead. They both just watch their sleeping baby while talking. Damien suddenly starts crying and Eleanor picks him up. When he said he would take care of the baby, Irina thought he meant handing the baby over to the nannies and servants. But he proved everyone wrong. She watches him rocking the baby and asks if there is nothing he can do about it. She compliments Eleanor's looks, which makes him uncomfortable. He gently puts sleeping Damien back in the crib. Irina kisses him and he carries her away while she says his face does not belong to him alone. It belongs to the whole world. 7 years later, Irina complains that Damien wakes up too early for a child his age. She blames Eleanor, saying he is the one who ordered Damien to wake up early. While they are talking, Damien joins them at the breakfast table. He politely greets his mother and she asks if he slept well. When he says yes, she tells him to go back to bed if he is still tired, but he says he is not. She watches him eat and wonders who taught him such perfect table manners. She looks at Eleanor and realizes he and their son eat in the same way, which makes her feel a bit lonely. Damien loves his mother. He likes how she always makes time to take him to children's plays, even when she is busy. But what he likes most is when she reads fairy tales to him. Damien also loves his father. Eleanor lets him read books about engines and always tells him that if anything happens, he should come and say it. He also tells him to avoid giving his mother anything to worry about. A few nights later, Eleanor comes out of the bathroom and finds Irina drinking. She is complaining because Damien passed his test with flying colors. She thinks he is too young for all that. Eleanor tells her that Damien just takes after her. She then complains again, saying he is also too young to be studying engines. She asks what if he grows up with no interest in people and disappears into the world of steam engines. Eleanor says that it is impossible, because by then, even newer engines will exist. Then he reassures her that Damien will grow up to be a better man than he is. He says when he was young, he didn't have her, but Damien does, so she should stop worrying so much. Then he takes her to bed. In the morning, Irina wakes up and finds Eleanor still asleep. She thinks she failed again, and she is sure he knows it. She decides that today, they are finally going to settle things once and for all. Eleanor is very strict about contraception. Irina asks him if he is not interested in having another baby, and he says he will not let it happen. Determined, she decides she will find a way to change his mind. First, she tries physical persuasion. She wears lingerie and tries to seduce him, but it does not work. Second, logical persuasion. She talks about how happy she is raising Damien. He says he is happy too, but this is not something they should approach emotionally. He explains that it is different from when she had Damien and that another pregnancy would take a much greater toll on her body. She asks if he is saying she is too old for another baby. He says he did not say that and starts walking away. She points out that he is not the one giving birth. She is the one going through the pain. He tells her the reason he does not want another child is that he cannot share that pain with her. Then he calls her stupid for not realizing that. So step 2 fails. For step 3, she decides to persuade him like the sun making a traveler take off his coat. On that day, the Archduke, whom Damien calls Grandpa, and Nick come to visit. Nick notices a change in Irina's expression and behavior. She clings to Eleanor and speaks softly, which makes Eleanor blush. That night, Irina begs for a second child and promises not to have a third. She even suggests they draw up a contract. She tells him how excited she is to welcome another family member. This time, Eleanor agrees. A few months later, Irina gives birth to a baby girl, Kelly, who looks just like Irina. Eleanor says Kelly does not seem like his child because he never thought his daughter could be this beautiful. As they talk, Damien joins them and Irina gives him Kelly to carry. He refuses, saying she is too small and he does not want to hurt her. When Irina asks if his sister is pretty, he nods and says she looks like a fairy. Eleanor could not be happier. He tells himself he will build a fortress around his family so no one can intrude. They will live comfortably until Irina, Damien, and Kelly find the world too small. And when that day comes, he will build the safest ship and take his wife and children on a journey. He holds his family as he says a line from a poem. I will always love you, until the seas dry up and the sun stops rising.